Hi, I'm LioConvoy, but you probably know that already. I know you've all been waiting for this video. I'm sorry it took so long to put together, but there's been a lot of revelations that have come to me as well as a ton of things thrown at me that I need to address, and I'll be addressing as much as I possibly can. I will preface this by saying there are wrongs I've committed, and they will be brought up. Accountability will be taken, and apologies will be made. But those aren't even the accusations that are most damning towards me. I've been accused of being an abuser of my found family by all but one member of it. That and other things are what I'm covering today. This video will not be short. It will not be a compilation of calls. It's going to be in-depth and have as much evidence as I can provide. While most of the claims of abuse against me don't have evidence to back them, I'll try to answer what I can with the evidence I do have, and fill in the rest with my own testimony. I only ask that you be patient and listen with an open mind. For those of you drawing, please pull up your screens or tabs to look at the screen to see the topics here that will be covered so it doesn't catch you by surprise. We're going to start by addressing the accusations levied at me by the person you all saw as the closest to me, and the person whose word is being taken the most seriously. There's going to be a lot about Hopeless Peaches that we'll need to get into later, but right now I'm focusing on their Google Doc against me. This was released in Senate after Lumi did a dramatic daily countdown leading up to it. This had been planned for the better part of a month. On the day of, Lumi accessed the Dinobot meant for server protection in order to demod everyone, post all of this, and throw things into chaos in a way I couldn't respond to. I'll go into more detail about how inappropriate this level of theatrics for such hefty claims are later, but that's how and when it got released. In order to get through all this, I'll need to go through a few things on a timeline concerning my found family unit. The first people in it were Opal and Jordan in 2021, then Jay was added later that year. Peaches popped into it in 2022. While I wish I could say things were always good, they weren't. And two specific incidents of note happening during these people's time in my family unit. The first major issue was in November of 2022, during Thanksgiving week. I decided it would be a good idea to have as many of them down for the holiday as possible. Unfortunately, it didn't go well. Within the first day, Opal decided to inform me that she no longer wished to be in the family unit. I could go into full detail and tell you every single issue here, but I think it would be best to just shorten it down to Opal feeling like she wasn't her own person, and not liking the standards I had. To cite one issue, Opal didn't like that I responded to her having a friend that shoplifted for fun as a friend she probably shouldn't have. So, Opal left the family unit, and I even got her an early flight back home. I haven't spoken to her since. However, during the same week, Jordan decided to be awful to everyone, including Peaches. He actively made every interaction a chore, and didn't alter any of that behavior until he absolutely had to. This put stress on everyone involved, but we soldiered on, hoping it would work itself out. The second and worst incident, though, was in February of 2023. Peaches and I had an ugly fight, one that's 100% my fault. The problem, though, was Peaches was in contact with both Jay and Jordan, and told both of them that he had downed pills in an attempt to end his life. The response both of them had was to do nothing. That included not contacting or telling me about it, not informing anyone that Peaches had hit that breaking point, not even checking on him the next day. Peaches could have lost his life, and neither of them did anything about it. Not even an apology until I pulled them into a call a month later after finding out all the details. This was an event that was never properly resolved as neither Jay or Jordan chose to take accountability and treat Peaches like a regular person. These are the two major events in the family unit. I'll detail other things as I go along. Let's get into it now.
Hey, this is Hopeless Peaches, and this is the last time you'll hear from me. First of all, I want to again apologize for my part in the Rosa Call in 2022. I wanted to state so earlier, but everything else that piled on since made me shut down, and, well, here we are. If you've been in Senate for a while, you'd know of the Rosa Call, and that I have regretted that call daily and genuinely done what I can to change this server so that it could never happen again. I don't know what happened for me to be so out of character as to allow that, let alone join in, but it doesn't erase that call though, and that's why I've pushed myself. But I can't push myself for Senate anymore.
Here, Peaches tries to set the beginning of this by saying he wanted to apologize for the Rosa Call earlier, but never did. Instead, he just got angry at me for the fact that call was even out there. I'll address that call yet again later in this video, but Peaches choosing to address this in a Google Doc instead of their largest platform when he had it is not only grossly inappropriate, but not proper accountability. While I included it in a video not specifically about it, I at least did the decency of addressing it. This is something Peaches never wanted to do. But the sad thing that we will get into later, as well as the falsehood that the activity Peaches started and continued to contribute to in that call isn't out of character, and I have the evidence to prove it later. However, it's going to be noted that this is obviously Peaches feigning accountability, tossing it out there in a rush to get the idea that I abused him, possibly to excuse his own actions, and to appear more pitiable to the overall public. Another thing to point out later is that this behavior for Peaches isn't out of character like he's claiming. As I mentioned earlier, he just moved it to more private places.
The reason I'm leaving Senate, and why I have purged all my social media, is to get away from LioConvoy and to find myself again.
I've never demanded that Peaches be like me or around me. Peaches told me and others that they were deleting all their platforms to get away from their harassers, people like Kai and Omnia. This was due to their involvement in the FCK and the fact that they claimed other creators were labeling them as a groomer and a predator because of it. Peaches had already disconnected from me by this point, something I didn't fight against or subvert. I gave him what he wanted, like I always did.
I used to say that I had been abused online for 10 years straight, but it's taken me a long time to realize the abuse didn't stop, and to say to myself that Thomas Guerra is an abuser. It's scary to admit it, but I feel it's true. He isn't a child predator that I'm aware of, as some people have claimed, but that doesn't mean he's some savior of the innocent either.
In this, Peaches makes the distinction that this is how he feels. This isn't based on evidence, just emotion. While having feelings about something can be valid, the important aspect about these feelings is how you utilize them. In this, Peaches utilizes it to toss accusations at me with no evidence. The fact that he even italicized the "that I know of" portion of the accusations of me being a predator is, frankly, disgusting. Especially that he would later to go on to imply I was a sexual predator in multiple different instances later on. If anything, the wording here is more like a cryptic preamble to what he would say later. This is Peaches trying to give themselves plausible deniability about how they're framing me in this doc. I also never claimed to be some sort of savior of the innocent either. I actively try to help people as much as I can, and have been doing so for 6 years, even to my own detriment. Peaches knows this. I may not always go about it in the best way, and I can acknowledge my shortcomings or my mistakes in that regard, but that's always been my intention.
Thomas Guerra is a man who's taken in vulnerable people, most he knew as minors, who have trauma relating to sexual abuse by older men to fulfill his fantasy of a perfect family.
I had 4 members of my found family. I met 2 of them when they were minors and took them in after they became adults. Jay and Peaches I met in their 20s. 50% isn't most, and Peaches actively knows this. He's intentionally being dishonest here about the percentage in order to paint the picture that I'm prowling for people to hurt, as we'll see later. Peach is painting this not only as fantasy while highlighting that they have sexual trauma by older men is again, Peach is trying to frame this as predatory.
All of us had been sexually abused by older parental figures. Jordan, Jay, Opal, and myself. My groomer posed the same family dynamic. Recently, I have found out that Thomas tried to push 2 other young, barely legal AFABs who were specifically groomed by Joshua Vida, Thomas Guerra's ex-friend, into this dynamic too, then treated them like shit when they refused.
While it is true that Peach's groomer proposed a similar family dynamic, as you can see with this screen cap, it's not the same. Peach is trying to constantly compare me to their groomer was a consistent thing he always did when he was mad at me. He did this because he knew it would hurt me. The claim about the other 2 is also wrong. I never tried to push anyone into my family dynamic. Heck, one of them, Jibs, is on record admitting quite the opposite.
Should have written
There's a point you wanted to raise. I remember you saying to me about the wording in a document about the AFABs being adopted into the family.
Oh, yes, that. I'm not... Okay. So in Peach's document... Sorry, Aaron. Sorry if I messed that up.
It's fine.
In Aaron's document, they mention that there were 2 other, they specifically word it, 2 other victims of Joshua Vida, so thus kind of excluding Jordan from that. I don't know if that was intentional, that were sort of pressured into the family dynamic with Lio, who said no and then, like, faced consequences for that. I'm aware of this potentially, because I've spoken with some people who know about that, but I'm confused as to if that was meant to include me in any sort. Because if so, that's not true. Okay.
No, you are not the other person in that.
Who, may I ask, is the other person? Because there were 3 really main victims of Vida. I did address it when I was on Beckett's livestream. I was like, I have no idea if this is trying to refer to me, but in case it is, that's not true at all. But that's all I said on that. Because I know Lio did make comments occasionally saying that he would have adopted me if it weren't for one, Opal being against that, because Opal was pretty possessive of Lio when it came to things, and against having another person. And then on top of that,
so
if
it's a whole different thing, to be
yeah,
honest.
and then the other reason was if he would need more accessibility stuff, which he didn't. So because I do have quite a few disabilities, and so that would have been a thing. But that was the most that was said about that. Other than that, if anything, I kind of made comments occasionally, being like, "Oh, I want you to be my parental figure," and stuff like that. But that was it.
That they wanted in my family unit, and I denied them. This isn't the only time Peaches, or Lumi as well, have lied about Jibs. They also lied about having permission to use the call, and when it was re-added to the doc, they lied about why Jibs allowed it. This is all because Peaches wanted to push a narrative, regardless of who else may get hurt. We can see Peaches' desire to push false narratives by the fact that even after Jibs corrected these statements, Peaches actively kept the claims in the call-out doc.
All of us AFAB, and all of us with deep-rooted trauma that made us susceptible to further abuse. Thomas used that to his advantage to play house, and if you didn't act how he wanted you to, he would verbally and mentally beat you down into a pulp. This is a pattern, and I didn't see it until now.
Them being AFAB had literally nothing to do with it. I took them in to try and give them a support network and care that their bio families never did. The idea that I did this to abuse them is a fabrication of Peaches' imagination to add to the severity of the accusation. The claim Peaches is making of me wanting the perfect family is also incorrect. Here are screen caps of Peaches beating me down for not being harsh enough to the other family members because of what they did to him. If I wanted a perfect family, then why did Peaches feel comfortable going to me with their issues with the others? Wouldn't I have been dismissive of any potential problems if I wanted to either maintain or achieve a perfect family dynamic? If I'm trying to help by addressing the issues for the sake of obtaining a perfect family dynamic, would that not be a good thing? My family was flawed, just like others. The problem here is that there were issues too that the individuals involved had no desire to properly correct, and I can't force adults to do so, despite what others may think.
In mid-late 2022, I had just separated from an abusive partner, and was still coming to terms with the abuse I faced IRL and online, which is when I started talking to Thomas properly. He seemed nice at first, but after a suicide attempt that resulted in my hospitalization, I had age regressed in the aftermath. Thomas pushed the idea of family onto me while I was in a vulnerable state, and then I woke up to being in his family. I didn't know how to set that boundary again and say no. That was on me. However, how Thomas treated me the moment I was in that family is not on me, and it's taken me too long to recognize that.
Here, Peaches is getting the timeline wrong. He did have an attempt on his life, and during that I stayed up late into the night on the call with him when he was in the hospital. Later, not the same day, he admitted to me in a call that he struggled with male authority figures in his life, and I offered to be that for him. While I considered him family from that moment on, he wasn't properly introduced to the others as such until about a week later, and when he was, Jay did a drawing and put it on Twitter, an event that made Peaches freak out because he didn't want it public yet, so it was removed. The integration into the family was slow. When it comes to the age regression, I had no clue that was going on at the time. This was a state I struggled to recognize on multiple occasions, even after I became aware of it, because I'm not intimately knowledgeable of mental health signs or specific behavioral cues, and Peaches knew that. Lumi would sometimes have to directly point out to me that Peaches was age regressing because I failed to recognize it. Putting this up as though I took advantage of this is to intentionally frame me as predatory.
For 8 months, Thomas would verbally and emotionally abuse me. He would use my triggers against me to push me into a regressed state, then would scream at me about my own abuse. He would tell me how I must be an abuse apologist because I doubted my grooming experience, and made extremely graphic and sexual comments about the abuse Jordan and Opal went through while I was age regressing, and begging him to stop, as some sadistic way of making a point of what real abuse is.
This is something we'll get into later, and I'm sorry I have to keep saying that, but Peaches reframed a lot of our interactions to convince me I was doing things without intending to and that I abused them. Truth is, abusers tend to start out by being super nice, then slowly remove the kindness to use it as a bargaining chip later. I never withheld kindness or affection from Peaches. Heck, I often discounted and discarded how I felt in the moment to give Peaches what he needed. On top of that, I never used his abuse against him. You can see the exact opposite in the DM here. The event that he's talking about is something I remember well. Peaches was fighting the idea that he was groomed despite the evidence that he had shown me. I brought up some of the others' experience to highlight Peaches' values need to be consistent in order to validate what he went through. While I won't doubt that I got more graphic than I should have to try to hammer this in, I didn't know he was age regressed at the time, nor did I actually accuse him of being an abuse apologist. Age regression is easier to notice in person than it is a basic voice chat. In fact, Peaches sometimes spoke in a childish manner for the fun of it, like on this stream.
Ooh, what is that? A ducky! A ducky! A ducky! A duck! A duck! A duck! A duck! A duck!
I have no recorded proof of this, but this week I realized during my social media purge that I do have evidence of this behavior, albeit reined in. On the 28th of February 2023, Thomas and the old Senate mods had a call with an 18-year-old victim of Joshua Vita, who will have their identity protected due to the comments made by Thomas being too disgusting to ever want to be forever tied to this person. Link to call. By accident, in verifying information about another young individual Thomas was weird with, Lumi stumbled upon even further evidence of Thomas, 35-36 at the time, berating and slut-shaming the victim in this call, 16-17 at the time, as well as mocking and dismissing their sexuality because they were abused by a man. This is still publicly accessible in the server. This behavior is proven in this call to have not changed due to Thomas's continuous homophobic and slut-shaming comments.
I'll be skipping this part of the doc here, as it's something that'll be addressed later on in the video.
If this is how he would treat victims in front of other people, I hope you can understand even in some small way how he would treat me for 8 months straight, behind the scenes when he can, and has lied about the severity of what he's did to me. How this victim was treated was disgusting, and I can assure it was not a one-time thing.
While I won't deny the way I treated this person was completely awful from start to finish, and I will be taking accountability for it, this isn't indicative of how I treat everyone. If it is, then Peaches is going to have a lot to answer for when we get to how I was treated for the past 2 years. Taking an event, or even a handful of events, where a person is at their worst is not evidence that they're like that with everyone, or that it's not activity they're trying to remove from their person.
Thomas Guetta keeps stating he has changed since the Rosa Call in 2022, whilst lying behind the scenes and pretending the work me and Lumi did to restructure the Senate was on him alone, despite the fact Lumi and I left Senate for a while because of Thomas's lack of accountability and refusal to let us put changes into place.
The idea that Peaches and Lumi were the only ones that worked to restructure the server is factually incorrect. You'll see that here where I started the group chat to discuss the changes, where I list the changes I think need to be made and ask for the input of others. Heck, even in my language, I slipped up and used the R word once since February of 2023. That's not just on the server either, but also seen in our DMs. I'm actively trying to do better. This is also seen in my content and how I run calls. Honestly, just making an outright rule against slurs of any kind was shot down by Peaches and Lumi when Heaton proposed it. Why? Because they still wanted to use them. You want to know why Peaches left Senate? Because he got mad at the people there. Not because of the inherent culture of the room. Lumi left because we got into an argument. While it's true Lumi refused to come back unless changes were made, they were changes I've also wanted and talked about for months before they were put in.
We came back because we thought Thomas changed and genuinely wanted to have a better place for people, to later find out he only placated us because he ran out of mods. Thomas would say he wanted mods who would hold him accountable, but when I called him out for his continued ableism towards Rosa in February 2022, he snapped at me, and K Cosmic had to step in and stop him from yelling at me, only for him to then pull me into a private call and yell at me there instead.
Here's the ableism Peaches is referring to, where I say that while the Rosa call was awful, that she's not incapable of making her own decisions, something that will, like many things, be expounded upon later. I didn't yell at Peaches about this. I asked multiple times how it was ableist. All he could respond with was, "It is," which is interesting, as Peaches regularly uses ableist slurs whenever the opportunity presents itself. I never thought I had the right to make him stop, as I didn't think until recently that I was on the spectrum, and I was told by multiple people on it that this was fine, but I should have stuck by my own principles here. Peaches has been scared of the public at large knowing about that call and using it against him, so he took to micromanaging me specifically. I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect, or that I'm not going to slip up or overcorrect, but the amount of scrutiny I was under for his anxiety wasn't reasonable.
On the 22nd of February 2024, Thomas had a call with a person called Raven from the SCC and was aggressive from the get-go despite Raven being civil with him. Thomas then chose to, by his own admission, assess their cognitive ability in front of over 100 people. I asked him to stop. Lumi tried to make him stop, and Thomas kept going, which made me have to server mute him, and he proceeded to get enraged at the mod staff, link to call, and then came at me with only aggression about it when he heard from his wife that I was in distress and suicidal.
The call with Raven, an SCC member that put kids in danger, didn't start as aggressive. I have no idea where he's getting that. I tried to assess Raven because not only did I catch her in a few lies, but I also didn't want to repeat the issue with Rosa. I've actively tried to find the proper balance dealing with people who have disabilities or that aren't neurotypical. I don't want someone with less cognition to get stomped on, while someone with more gets off easy. While I won't pretend in retrospect that I didn't get too personal, this wasn't me trying to embarrass or be ableist to someone on the spectrum. This is me overcorrecting for past inappropriate behavior that I didn't want to repeat. I also never snapped at Lumi. Here's the clip.
Okay. I'm not going to go further on that. I'm asking for a reason, Lumi, before you interrupt.
I was going to ask what the relevance of being able to drive was.
I told you I'm asking that for a reason. Can you please let me work here?
How is that snapping? Answer. It's not. Peaches server-muted me, yes, which in retrospect, I'm also fine with. But I wasn't doing well from all the pressure he's put me under, so I vented to fellow staff about how I felt Peaches was trying to publicly embarrass me. I couldn't tell them why I felt that way. Not only was I not aware of the full scope of what was going on, but also who'd believe me if I talked about it. Instead, my struggle was recorded and given to Peaches without me knowing. I would later find out that Peaches and others secretly recorded calls where I was distressed while making a mockery of it in a hidden server. Peaches and Lumi actively removed any ability for me to have a support network to talk about what was going on. This was intentional. What Peaches isn't telling you is that the call we had later was after I had woken up. Peaches knows that's the worst time to hit me with things because I have sleep apnea and I tend to be quite groggy after just waking up. Yet he has ignored that boundary multiple times to tear into me at these times. Peaches would approach me at times when he knew I couldn't think or process information properly, times when I was mentally compromised and vulnerable from lack of adequate sleep. I didn't immediately assess their ideation because there have been plenty of times where he just blew up on me about it. I could have handled that call better, no doubt, but I haven't been okay for a while now, a fact Peaches was aware of.
Link to call 1 and call 2. Thomas has pushed me to the point of self-harm and suicide, even up to present day. I thought it was only me who was being affected, so I bottled it up. I wasn't always treated like shit, so I convinced myself it was fine. I was told to get over being sexually abused only a couple months after it happened when I was still dealing with the PTSD flashbacks of it. I was told I let my groomer get to other people because I didn't realize what he did to me until I was 21 years old and lost his information. For Thomas to then backtrack when I told other people what he said and pretend it never happened.
Gonna be blunt here, the fact that Peaches blames me for self-harm and their ideation when I was regularly in call and text with them worried about it is disturbing. I never wanted to push him to that. I cared about him. Why would I? The comment about get over it didn't even come from me. It allegedly came from my wife. Someone that isn't used to the discussions about SA, I always doubted that she said exactly that, but I had no evidence to provide to counter Peach's claim, and any attempt at discussing it further was met with claims of believing that they're a liar or crazy. I have asked my wife, but she doesn't remember ever saying that to Peaches. This isn't to say directly that Peaches is lying, but there's nothing proving that this interaction happened. The only other person present doesn't remember what Peaches is accusing them of having said that, and when pressed on it, Peaches immediately jumped to accusing the confronter of calling them a liar or thinking they're crazy. Does that mean my wife is part of trying to convince Peaches he's crazy? If someone was just misremembering or misunderstood someone else's intention in a conversation, why would they instantly turn to accusing the person who asked them about it of calling them crazy or a liar? Misunderstanding or misremembering something doesn't make you either of those things. I never told Peaches he let his groomer do anything. I did the opposite, not only shown through the screen cap, but also in multiple calls where he blamed himself. Peaches wanted to tell the world about things I never witnessed and demanded I go along with it or be labeled as abusive.
Recalling how he spoke to that victim in 2023, how he would use that same language against me for 8 months straight, how he defended Kumo pushing a girl into self-harm in February 22nd, 2023, how he's treated my friends, and recently how he has been using ableist language to justify the Rosa Call and to justify embarrassing Raven, I realized I can't be his lightning rod anymore.
I never justified Kumo pushing someone to self-harm. Kumo fed me a sob story that I didn't know what to do with. There's a difference here. Hate to tell you this, but I'm not magically knowledgeable about how everyone deals with stuff like that. I don't have all the answers. Peaches also makes claims about how I treated his friends, but doesn't list what I've done. Probably because I don't think I did anything. I already demonstrated what they were calling ableist language, and that's not what this is, along with the Raven claim. But I'll admit that his claim of being my lightning rod is infuriating, because even casual viewers would know that I was his. Anytime Peaches got into heat or an argument on Twitter, I had to be there. I took the heat. I took the hits. I was used as a sword and shield by Peaches to both friend and foe. Even when he was completely in the wrong, I had to be the one to draw the attention.
After that point, I distanced myself from Thomas since rewatching the recording of the call I made to protect myself after warnings from the mods. It made me reflect on how I've been treated these past 2 years. I thought I could collect myself and understand how best to cut him off softly in a way he wouldn't blow up. But it seems even just staying with a group of friends away from Senate and LioConvoy was too much for him.
Peaches cut me off for the first time on March 6th. The only example of me allegedly not honoring that is asking Lumi if they're okay. I did this because last time Peaches did something like that, they attempted. meaning there was a precedent for me to be worried, and I was scared. Peaches went around the block himself on March 8th by calling me on my cell phone to get me to inform Crystal that the Glitchtail videos are down because of privacy and defamation claim. A few days afterwards, once Peaches got what they wanted out of me, they blocked me again, and I honored that. I never blew up or threatened to. I never asked anyone else about him or what was going on. I completely left him alone and honored his request. On top of that, the logs we have of his personal server say something completely different about all of that.
I found out Thomas has been going around to commentary channels before and after this point, saying his own outrageous beliefs and passing them off as mine, claiming he solely changed Senate after the Rosa call, despite me being yelled at and belittled for months after that call, whenever I begged him to restructure the server, and creepiest of all, to me, he pretended him and I were still close and familial. We haven't been family for a while. But Thomas would refuse to give me that space and made me feel unsafe correcting that.
If this is what I was doing, then why aren't there any examples provided? Yes, I wanted the server to change, but I don't recall ever saying it was solely my work. And what outrageous beliefs? There's nothing here to work with. What I can tell you though is Peach is always worried about people thinking he agrees with all my actions and opinions. Granted, he never shared that concern in reverse, but hindsight is 20/20. I didn't go out and tell people they were no longer family because that's a private matter. I'm not obligated to spread his thoughts. And what's this nonsense about not being a family for a while? How long is that to people? Because here Peaches was calling me dad in early February of this year. Peaches is outright lying here to push the idea that I'm some sort of creepy stalker. I always gave Peaches space when he asked for it. The only time I didn't was when he was a danger to himself.
Thomas didn't want the public to know he mistreated yet another family member.
Peaches has multiple times said to myself and other people that they know I didn't abuse the others, or that they didn't believe them. Peaches is trying to piggyback off of what I'm dealing right now to do as much damage as possible. If he knows that I didn't abuse the others, then he's lying here.
I have so much regret for not seeing through his persona sooner. I always brushed it off as it just being an issue with me, and that I deserved everything I got, especially with how Thomas would seem genuinely nice whenever he wasn't being questioned. When the call in February 2023 happened, I was shaken to my core and regressed, and forgot most of everything, including the fact I was the one who had the recording. I'm sorry.
At this point, I'm starting to wonder about the regressing. It seems to be a key anytime Peaches has to be responsible for anything. Also, Peaches mentioned the call to someone in May of that year. Peaches may genuinely have memory issues, yes, but it's got two edges on it. If you remind him of things he doesn't remember, he'll just accuse you of lying. Especially if it's unfavorable to him. There's nothing wrong with struggling, but when you treat everyone as suspicious, then you're going to cause problems. You're not nefarious for having memory issues, but if you're constantly accusing anyone who brings up something you don't remember or remember differently of lying or thinking you're crazy, then that demonstrates a severe lack of trust on your end. On top of that, Peaches has refused to give Jibs that call in full.
I feel stupid, honestly. Thomas would go to such extremes to make me feel unsafe, and that I had to be around. In the first 8 months, my known suicidal ideation would be used as an excuse by Thomas to threaten me with police visits and being put away for a while if I stopped responding to / hung up on Thomas when he was screaming at me. I could have just refused to listen and plead a case for myself if Thomas did this, but at the time I was freshly out of an abusive relationship and was constantly pushed to regression. I know better now.
Every time Peaches was suicidal, I tried to calm them down. Every time Peaches had ideation, I tried to calm them down. They knew hanging up freaked me out because I'd assumed the worst. When I knew they were having the ideation and trying to act on it, I'd always try to get them back and call. But if that didn't work, what else was I supposed to do? All I could do was call emergency services or tell Peaches that I'd have to if they wouldn't pick up. I never used it as a threat or a weapon. It's all I could do to try and keep them safe. He'd tell me I didn't care, so what was I supposed to do? Nothing? The fact that he's listing it out as a control thing is disgusting and a willful misrepresentation of my character. Peach is either capable of or fully willing to misrepresent responsible, concerned behavior pertaining to keeping him safe as malicious, calculated abuse for the sake of furthering this narrative. I'll also point back to the incident in February of 2023 where Jay and Jordan didn't tell anyone that Peaches had taken pills. So there, they were in trouble for not telling someone, but I should be expected to not contact help for them if they're in the same position? There's no winning with this logic. Every answer is wrong.
Thomas? A real father wouldn't yell and scream at family. A real father wouldn't use their kids' trauma against them as a means of winning petty arguments. A real father wouldn't threaten to divorce his own wife to keep their kids in check. A real father wouldn't make graphic sexual comments while they're age regressing and begging you to stop. Hell, a real father wouldn't take months, multiple scoldings, being cut off, and having your entire script reworked just to respect their family's gender, only to keep calling me your dear daughter, despite me being neither a woman nor part of your family. Stop pretending we're close. Stop pretending you're looking out for me. Stop pretending we're in contact. Full stop.
Any attempt at any form of disagreement with Peaches would result in a meltdown or a threat to his safety. By Peach's standards, a real father gives their kids anything they want at all times. Ironic, as I attempted to do just that, to the detriment of almost every friendship or relationship I have. I never weaponized his trauma against him, but he sure did against me, as you'll find out later. And how would I keep kids in check by threatening to divorce my wife? How does any of that make sense? As far as the gender goes, Peaches was gender fluid for the past few months, changing it on almost a daily basis. Peaches wrote this document on March 14th, claiming I would constantly misgender them, yet I have screenshots of Peaches going by she/they on February 24th of the same year. 19 days apart. Lumi concretely made an announcement about Peach's pronouns on March 6th, the same day the two of them cut contact with me, up until Peaches called me on my phone on March 8th and kept hounding me about the Crystal video until March 10th. Up to this point, myself and many other people in Senate were under the impression that Peaches was still gender fluid, so we didn't know that he had chosen to fully stick with he/they. It's hard to just turn your brain around on what pronouns to use with a person, especially if it's constantly changing. You're going to make mistakes and will need to be corrected once in a while. While I may have misgendered them in an earlier script, it wasn't out of malice or intention, but habit. I also stopped calling them my dear daughter, which was just the custom name I gave their Discord. Anytime past the cutoff when people asked me about him, I told them to ask him or another person. But let's talk about the sexual comment stuff. The reference here is the event I mentioned earlier. Peach's entire doc is framed in the way Peaches had me claim Crystal's tweets were towards them, intentionally done to frame me as some sort of dangerous predator. That's why this is typed this way. Especially saying he said sexual things to me while I was age regressed. Like, how do you think people are going to read that? Which is interesting because that's exactly what Peaches was angry at Crystal for allegedly doing to him, framing Peaches as some sort of sexual predator. But apparently it's fine for him to do it to me. It's also a good time to mention that he leaked that script. This was mostly a vent of a first draft, as it was an extremely close matter. Peaches tossed it out into the public, specifically to harm me, knowing it was a vent and the final script wouldn't be anything like that.
You told me many times that the reason you never had real kids, biological or adopted, was because you knew you would abuse them. If you know this, stop beating down on vulnerable victims of sexual abuse and instead get some goddamn help.
While the rest of this is either outright lies or fabrications, this one stopped me dead in my tracks. What Peaches did here was take something I told him in absolute confidence, alter it, and blast it to the public to do as much damage as possible. I would later find out that he's done worse. But since this is out here now, I have to address it and correct it, knowing full well it's going to be weaponized against me by the worst of people. When I was a kid, my old man abused me in every way but sexually. As is normal, I picked up some of his habits and traits, and I've been working to alter them. It's where my authoritative tone and general demeanor comes from. So, like most victims of abuse, I always worried about winding up like the person that abused me. That's one of the reasons why I never had kids. The fear that I'd wind up like him. Not that I magically knew I would. These were personal, private concerns that I shared with Peaches, primarily because he pushed me into doing so. As soon as he saw fit, he turned around and weaponized them against me. This is barely a month after he chose to cut contact with me when he started this. In contrast, if I had done that to Peaches, and he had the screenshots to prove it, how would that look? I'd certainly look like a deplorable, backstabbing individual, wouldn't I? Someone who collects the private information shared by people they claim to be friends with so that they can use it against them later. I also did get some help. I hate having to admit this publicly because I'm a private person about things like this, but I'm on medication now and was going to therapy. The only reason it stopped, as far as the therapy goes, was because my therapist stopped taking my insurance, something Peaches knew about. But in one of our last calls, Peaches berated me for not being in therapy anymore, claiming that I said to someone that I got what I needed out of it, which isn't something I actually said. During this call, which is yet another one I didn't know was recorded, Peaches and their friends in their private discords actively mocked my inability to find a therapist. Specifically Lumi, who, despite claiming they advocate for mental health, would just list Google results for therapists in my area as though it was just that easy. These people don't privately hold the values they espouse publicly. If I wasn't getting help, though, how would this public form of humiliation convince me to do so? None of this makes sense.
Also, stop pretending you care about victims of grooming. You found the information of my groomer, and all you did was use my abuse against me, play it down because it wasn't Joshua Vita, and tell me straight you only desire to make fun of my groomer in a Senate call, not help report his predatory actions. And you blame me, a victim of his, for his potential other predatory actions?
Peaches is outright lying here. When Peaches would tell me about his groomer, I always felt sad for him. The fact that sadness was the emotion I had instead of anger always had Peaches accuse me of not caring what happened to him. As far as his groomer specifically goes, we actively tried to find him, and I could never confirm his location, something Peaches regularly blamed me for and verbally abused me over. I also never said I just wanted to make fun of him. Since there's little in the way of evidence, the plan was to get him in call and see what he'd admit to and then file a report. Peaches knew this, but would regularly make a claim to the contrary, just like the claim I blamed Peaches for the actions of his groomer. I did not ever do that. So my anger was a problem, but if I wasn't angry enough and focused in the direction Peaches wanted, that was also a problem.
I have deleted everything to be away from you and finally find myself. Respect that. Do not contact me. Age regression, for those who don't know to understand this statement, Thomas included apparently, is a trauma response in which the brain shuts down and reverts to an earlier developmental stage. For me, I regress to points around 5 to 10 years old mentally. It is extremely damaging to talk to somebody age regressing in a way you wouldn't talk to an actual child, as it can result in re-traumatizing said regressor. Thomas knew all of this and chose to abuse it.
I always respected it when Peaches wanted distance. He knows this, but he's lying intentionally in order to push a narrative he knows isn't correct. Peaches planned on deleting all of their socials back when the FCK stuff came to light. Him saying it's to get away from me when I respected his distance is just a lie in order to cover his own tracks as he runs away from accountability.
Note, this testimony has nothing to do with Jade and Jordan's claims. I could go into detail about how it is flatly disgusting to knowingly run to Fox Mafia and people who have said/platformed videos saying how I should be sexually assaulted. I cannot comment one way or the other on the specificities of their relationship with Thomas Guerra, as I was never present for it. That being said, I won't just dismiss the fact that Thomas has been an abuser. To the usual suspects who've been stalking me for nearly half a decade now, who will certainly be laughing reading all this, like the last time I was abused, I'm sorry, after 4 years, your only topic is gone now. Hope you find a new way to make rent.
Peaches was present for a lot of it. Maybe not in person, but at least in various calls and details about how things went. The reason he has no evidence of me being an abuser to them and him is simply because I wasn't. And what? You can morally grandstand about people running to Fox Mafia while you're actively lying and revealing personal fears that were revealed to you in private just so you can craft a narrative damning enough to make yourself look like a victim so you can scamper off without judgment or accountability? Oddly enough, because Peaches wants to be petty when people can't fire back, he directs the last part of the doc to the real reason he deleted everything. While the initial docs and posts say this isn't some sort of cancellation attempt, the fact that Peaches added this says their intentions pretty clearly. Of course, Peaches never thought about how this will affect people outside of himself, like always. So, now I'm dealing with victims being used against their will as a weapon against me, all my work being called into question, as well as my friends getting regular threats of different varieties. It also puts the people I've helped into an awful mental position, questioning if they trusted the right person or feeling I may lash out at them even though I haven't before. But Peaches totally cares about others, right? There's a lot about Peaches and I that I really need to go over so people will fully understand what was going on behind the scenes. That's going to be addressed in its own section. For now though, we'll move on to the others. This is an interview with a former family member named Jay. Jay came onto the scene in 2021 and quickly clung to the family dynamic. Jay temporarily moved in with the wife, Jordan and I, in 2023 with plans of moving her in with her boyfriend. While her boyfriend and I just wanted her to go straight there, she chose to come here instead. Jay was dismissed from the family in December and within that month went to move in with her boyfriend. She was dismissed due to never taking proper accountability for her actions with Peaches in February of 2023 and for essentially using the wife and I as free room and board, which included us taking care of both their cats during that time with no consideration from her concerning their health or monetary needs. Jay decided to piggyback off Jordan's claims and also yapping to Kumo. This isn't new behavior for her, by the way. When she broke up with Just a Robot in 2018, she attempted to cozy up to Ponder, subtly pressing the potential for a video to be made. Ponder tried to placate Jay while they were venting, but had no intentions of ever taking up the suggestion, as Ponder isn't interested in making videos calling someone out for personal relationship problems. This is actually why Jay came to Senate in the first place, trying to get me to go after Jar as well. I'm stating this so you're all aware that this isn't new for her. She just finally found someone dumb enough to do the work for her.
So back to actually just sort of a follow-up on your first impressions of Lio when you first met him. Do you have any comments on his appearance, his hygiene, his manners, attitude, etc.?
To really get into how I felt about what he looked like and how he really was in person, all I can say is one word: disgusting. And I don't like saying that in a really, really mean way, but he really needs help with that. And again, not trying to be a dick. It smells like he hadn't taken a shower in weeks. When he wears black shirts, you can see, like, it looks like snow is on his shoulders, and that's really gross. I know that he's working every day, so I don't entirely blame him, but there's always time for hygiene. Him as a person, he's very extroverted online, but introverted in person, which means he stays in his office all day, and he would just stay in there and work on his figures all day, and it was to a point where I had begun to really think to myself when I officially moved with him, and I was like, holy shit, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Because I had friends, I had family back where I lived, and yeah, there was a bit of me that was like, oh, I hate my job, but in reality, me moving in with him and realizing who he really was the biggest mistake I've made by far.
Firstly, if we're talking about serious accusations of abuse, what does hygiene have to do with it? Jay's complaints here not only come from a lack of understanding reality, like the fact that I work a manual labor job that was in the middle of the summer, and Jay only saw me after work, but it highlights that Jay, and by extension Kumo's intent, is to gather as many unrelated issues as possible to humiliate me, rather than address this very serious accusations of abuse. So whatever nonsense Jay is saying about hygiene is irrelevant at best and projection at worst. When it comes to being in my office, no, it's not messing with figures, and Jay knows that. During the time Jay lived with me, often I was working on my secondary job with an indie comic company, and I can't exactly do that sitting in the living room. The tablet I have is an XP Pen 22, not an iPad. My office was always open to Jay, and she knew that. The option's always been there, though I'm sorry if it wasn't communicated clearly enough.
Have you ever seen Thomas attempt to adopt anyone else, either online or offline?
Seeing him try to adopt anybody else, I don't entirely think so, aside from Hopeless Peaches. I'd never seen him try and comfort anybody in the way that he does with her, or anything in that manner. Personally, I have not seen it. He has not been a very kind person lately. So, in the grand scheme of things, to answer your question bluntly, aside from Hopeless Peaches, no.
I showed Jay and the others the same amount of kindness that I did Peaches. You can see this through our texts as well. The failure here wasn't on my end. I housed and took care of Jay with whatever she needed. How she doesn't see that as kindness, I'll never know.
Did Lio ever approach you with the idea of moving in with him?
He didn't approach me with the idea of moving in with him. I think I was in a moment of desperation to say, I would love to be here, I would love to be around you guys more often, and it's like, I want to stay, because there was a lot of good that I was seeing, but I was not prepared for the bad. You know how people say it's like, you got the good, the bad, and the ugly? I was around all three, with Lio. He did kind of instigate the idea, he did kind of like fan the flames when it came to that. And he kept asking and asking and asking, and yeah, I was procrastinating because I was dealing with a lot of mental and medical issues. there were many reasons as to why I shouldn't have moved, but what was going on with Peaches was probably the biggest part of me regretting what I said back then. I don't think that there was a lot of hope for our relationship to have mended, so I was wanting to really backpedal and be like, I can't do this. So, I hope that answers your question.
Jay wasn't pushed towards coming here. In fact, in the text you'll see here, I make it clear that she can take her time in actually coming down. The only pushing done was reminding Jay to not build up a life in a place she wasn't planning on staying in.
Alright, what made the idea of adoption so appealing to you?
The idea of adoption was, it kind of came out of nowhere. Because as I said, I had a weird relationship with my parents. My mom was very strict growing up, and my dad was a raging alcoholic. I didn't have really much of a good relationship, but they weren't entirely bad either. I used to live close to my dad, actually. He lived right down the street from me. I would check on him every day, and he was probably my best friend. I just didn't realize it. But during the time my dad actually moved away and got a new place, not too far from me again, I still felt pretty lonely without a really good father model. So I thought with Lio, he was going to fill that space. And it's like, you're the father that people wish they had, and you're the father that I wish I had. It's like you have a very paternal personality, and I can see why some people like you. And it was after I pretty much bared my heart and soul to him that I said all that. And that was when I got the Lio's Pride role in the Senate that exact same day. That was what made things appealing. I wanted a paternal role model, but it was only after my dad passed away that I was able to get that, and that is really heartbreaking because there's a lot I could say on that, but I'm going to keep that confidential for now.
I told Jay to distance herself from her biological parents because they were complicit in past and present abuse of her. You could argue that this was a step too far, but this wasn't some scheme to isolate her. It was trying to get her not to be in the presence of the people who had hurt her. Based on what was shared with me, I thought this was the better option at the time. Of course, you can argue that this was not the right decision, but you should also be aware of the same information that led to that decision. Jay is painting the idea that she became part of the family after her bio dad passed. This is incorrect, as seen in the caps where Jay literally mentions telling him about me.
When conflict arose between siblings, were you all expected to handle it yourselves, or would Thomas make an attempt to resolve the issue or help?
The conflict in between us as siblings, we would actually try to solve it, with one another. We'd resolve the conflict together as often as possible. In fact, Jordan and I, we used to argue all the time, but we'd always find a way to make up, which meant we knew our limits, we knew we had to give each other time. That was where our conflict seemed to work itself out, by giving each other time to really reflect on our actions and then talk over it and see where we can go from there. When conflict arose recently, it had to be a family intervention every single time, and back then it wasn't like an interrogation in between siblings. In fact, it was, you two need to work things out. You guys aren't in trouble, but you two need to work this out. But then when it came to Hopeless Peaches, every conversation, she would be brought up to us as if it was an interrogation. So in the beginning, yes, we did try and fix things in between siblings, but recently it's been more like an interrogation, more than a resolution to our problems.
Jay isn't being truthful here. There were plenty of spats that happened that I had to resolve before Peaches showed up. One in particular was between her and Opal, because Opal was upset and felt like Jay was forcing herself into the family unit and trying to get too close to her too quickly. The reason I had to intervene when it came to Peaches was because both Jordan and Jay would lie about what's going on and refuse to make the personal changes to alter that dynamic.
Have you ever witnessed another found family outside of yours personally? And if so, how would you describe it?
I actually did know of another found family aside from mine. It was actually from people at my old job. I'm going to keep their names out of this, but there was a really, really nice woman who would come into my store with her biological 2 kids and her 2 adopted kids, and she was raising them as their own, and she was lovely. She actually took me in once in a while if I felt scared, and if I felt alone, she would have me hang out over at her house. She was a very wonderful person through and through. I still talk to her to this day. I love her to death. There are found families out there that can work, but it's just the way that Lyle wants his to function. He's wanting to play kids like a yokel and use them for clout, if you want me to be honest. It's embarrassing. But a found family, the definition of it is it's a found family. We didn't find it, we were forced within it. I think that was very foolish. But the found family I did witness, it was very beautiful. It was a beautiful sight to see. And I never really saw Lio as a savior. I didn't see him as a savior to me. I felt like I was more of a prisoner in this family than anything else. But with the person that I am speaking of, she has actually done more for me than Lio tenfold. And will do so much more for kids in the later future. Like, the thing is, I'm not saying that found families are just weird or gross. The one that I had was weird and gross. The one that I was once almost involved in as a daughter, I was actually in a bad headspace, but because of the friends that I made, who were almost my found family, they were the ones that truly lifted me up. They were the people who actually would help me out emotionally and giving me verbal, emotional support. He never did. He barely ever did. He just said for me to suck it up and be a woman.
How exactly did I use any of them for clout? Much less use Jay at all. Jay would actively insert herself into Senate calls to declare our familial relation. I feel this is projection on Jay's part, considering her habit of running to other content creators for attention whenever she has a problem with people.
In terms of your friendship / adopted family stuff, were there any issues that went unresolved?
The family issues that went unresolved, in between me, Jordan, and Opal? No. We never left anything unresolved. We'd always find a way to talk things out. We'd always find a way to cheer each other up and move on. Even if it's with an apology, if it's with spending time together and actually laughing together and putting in the time. Absolutely, in between me, Jordan, and Opal, we've been closer than ever. But when it came to Hopeless Peaches, from what I've gathered, she always holds a grudge. Whether it would be over something small or something huge, she always holds a grudge and thinks that she's going to be completely justified within doing so. But in terms of me, Jordan, and Opal, nothing goes unresolved. But with Hopeless Peaches, she would intentionally leave things unresolved so she would have something to be petty and angry over. I tried as hard as I could to resolve things with her, but she continued to be passive-aggressive, she continued to be angry, and I don't tolerate pettiness. I really don't. I've never been one to take it like a bitch. So when it came down to her discussing things with me or her being passive-aggressive, it's something I couldn't stand. And there is something that I stand by, which is you have to show apathy at some point. And that doesn't mean that things should be left unresolved. It means that you need to walk away. You need to keep your mental health afloat as well, because you can't just focus on one person. You have to focus on yourself too. And that's what I had to do, show apathy. And that's what I explained to Lio in the car. I said to him, I have to show apathy. There's a reason why I'm not talking to her. And the way he tries to resolve things with us has never been put yourself in their shoes. He only said that when it came down to Hopeless Peaches. And that infuriated me. He never did that with me, Jordan, or Opal. He only said that about her. So it showed where his loyalty really lied within that moment. So, to answer your question as bluntly as I can, in between me and my 2 other siblings who I still love and care for, nothing went unresolved. But with Peaches, her pettiness is the reason why nothing was resolved.
Wait, so not only am I not supposed to mediate between you guys when there's a spat, but I'm also supposed to in order to resolve things? This inconsistency is wild.
With that as well, in terms of your experience with being part of that, did it feel like you were stuck in a toxic environment?
To say that I was in a toxic environment is a heavy understatement. I was actually getting physically ill from how bad things had gotten. I was internally bleeding from stress. I had constant headaches. I was vomiting. I dealt with panic attacks almost every single day when I could even feel like Lio was watching me. Because of the whole situation, I could not really sleep properly either. To really say that I was just uncomfortable in that is just an understatement to the scenario that we are discussing here. I felt like I was always being watched. I felt like I was always just having to be completely aware of my surroundings, almost hyper aware, to a point where it stressed me out immensely. Hospital visits, I needed those a lot, but I couldn't get them because he would always ask. It's just like, hey, what's going on with you? What caused it? Yada yada yada. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But to say I was uncomfortable or felt like I was trapped, I was very much a prisoner of my own doing because I made that decision to willingly put myself under his care. But care is not something that he really gave to me. It was later on in the time that I was visiting him, it felt more like torment. But it's the only person who actually gave me joy in that house, aside from Jordan, was Lio's wife. She would actually start conversations like, hey, how was your day? That was the only thing that really brightened up my day. Just her presence alone. Him, he would never involve himself in my life. He never asked, and I never answered. Because he would never try to really be there for me. He would always just ask, like, have you talked to Peaches today? And I'm tired of hearing it. No, I'm not going to talk to her. Because she's made me tired. And I was a prisoner of my own making because of the situation. So to say I was just uncomfortable or felt like I was trapped, again, total understatement.
How can I simultaneously be not involved in Jay's life, but also be so concerned when there's an issue with her physically that I'm asking questions to better understand it and try to help? This statement is trying to frame me as not being willing to let Jay go to the hospital, which is actively contradictory to any other situation like this, including the multiple times in the past 2 years I've had to call ambulances for people. Jay can't help but contradict herself. Not to mention, if I'm supposed to be controlling and abusive to such an extent that I'm pulling my victims in to live with me, then why would I ignore them when they're finally within that bubble of control? When an abuser pulls someone into their circle, it's for the sake of being able to control them easier. Now, you could 100% argue that an unwillingness to let Jay go to the hospital was that, provided you could also prove that's what happened. However, more broadly speaking, it wouldn't make sense for me to ignore Jay most of the time she was there. Wouldn't that simply weaken whatever hold I was trying to build?
I feel like this is just the elephant in the room, but it happens to be our next question. Were there any signs of favoritism?
There were many signs of favoritism. It actually all started in Thanksgiving, because I was on vacation to see Lio, Jordan, and Opal. Unfortunately, during the time, Peaches could not be there, but now I see that was very fortunate. To see signs of favoritism, apparently Peaches and I were the favorites, because everyone was mad at Opal. Everyone had to be mad at Jordan. But then it turned out that Peaches was pulling on the strings, intentionally trying to lie about Jordan, saying that he was doing all these horrible things and said horrible things. And even then, Lio would believe it. And when it came down to situations that would happen later on, I feel like that's not really my story to tell just yet. But when it came down to that situation, favoritism it was really there, and it showed. I was not really shown any love or support. I had only hung out with him twice when I was actually around him in person. But it was every day that Lyle would be hanging out with Peaches or streaming with Peaches or doing something in call with Peaches. He'd never hang out with us. He'd never show any attention towards me or Jordan. So Jordan and I would have to go out of our own way to have our own fun, whether it be go out and party, whether it be going to a bar, whether it be, just going to the gas station and getting something to drink or going to a taco shop and getting something to eat. We had to make our own fun because Lyle was never there to share fun experiences with us. So, showing signs of favoritism here, he really favored Hopeless Peaches. And we were ready to just give up, so we said to ourselves, take him. He cares about you more, he makes it clear. So, to answer your question, yes, and that favoritism goes to Hopeless Peaches every time.
I keep seeing a claim on favoritism, but there's never any actual evidence for it. The situation during Thanksgiving was me showing Jay and Jordan favoritism, if anything. This will be expanded upon later. Jay claiming I spent a bunch of time with Peaches isn't false, but Jay never really showed care to want to spend time with me. To give you all an example you'll understand, what is the name of the cat you guys sometimes hear or see in my content? Gidget, right? That's because Gidget always wants into my office to spend that time with me. While other cats like Amber or Lumpy might do so on occasion, it's primarily Gidget, because Gidget wants in. It's essentially that. Peaches was more like Gidget, and Jay was more like Amber.
In general, did it ever feel like you could or could not be your own person?
To be my own person, being my own person, it sounds like a joke, personally to me. To say that I couldn't really be myself around him, yeah, I could say that's true, because I ended up almost becoming him, in a sense. Because I remember being on a phone call with somebody who I was extremely angry at, and then when I heard it later on, I started thinking, I'm sneering like LioConvoy, I'm yelling like LioConvoy, I have the same anger issues as LioConvoy. And because of the guilt I felt, I really could not sleep. I felt like I had to do everything I could during that time to please him, whether it be becoming him or stressing myself out to the point where I felt like I was him. When I was in the hospital, I was really unwell, and I remember texting Lio saying, I feel like I have to be like you, because you said that we're grown-ups, we're adults, we have no time to be sad. We have no time to stress. We have no time to shed tears. We have no time for that. There's no time to be sad. You have to work. It's either work or be sad. It's one way or the other. And I took that to heart and made that part of my life. And he said, never do that. That was only directed towards me. Then why are you saying it as if we have to follow that guide? We have to follow your rules. Because if we don't please you, if we stop crying, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be proud of us. Maybe if we just swallow our feelings like a big old pill, it'd just make you more happy for us, that we're becoming stronger, that we're moving on from our trauma, that we're moving on from the things that we've done in the past. But that does nothing. To become him is what would make him proud. And I think, again, that is incredibly foolish of us to do.
I'm sorry, but I never gave Jay some standard where she had to be like me. In fact, I actively discouraged it. It's weird that Jay is taking on a standard she was told not to, and then gets mad at me for her decision.
Yeah, but as I said, for Jordan transitioning, the whole attitude changed. He was just like, I don't know how to explain it. It just became more brutal, and I had to witness it. And almost be a part of it, and that...
Again, because I asked Jordan the first time, and I think Jordan just didn't have enough time to digest or become comfortable enough to answer. So I definitely want to see if Jordan will speak on that, because that was a curiosity I had, if it was the transition, if that had any effect on the relationship.
Oh, it did.
Since I have you here, from your perspective, how would you say the transition affected Would you say the transition had any effect on the family?
Jordan's transition, it didn't muddy the waters, per se, but it did change how Lio would talk to him. I remember being in a call before I went on vacation for Thanksgiving, and again, I feel like this is not something I can fully say, but I do remember Lio screaming and yelling at Jordan saying, "Straighten your back like a man, stop crying. It's like you need to talk to us." And usually I would be the person to be like, yeah, he's right, he does need to talk to us, but in that moment I felt like I was forced to say something like that. But I tried telling Jordan about how I understood how he felt, because I was in his shoes. Because I felt like I had nowhere to go, I didn't know what to do. But Lio stopped me in my tracks from saying anything like that. He said, "No, we're not doing that sympathetic crap. You're not doing that here." I had to hold my tongue from saying anything because I felt like I had to listen to him. But for Jordan's transition to being male, it did change how Lio perceived him, and I think it was disgusting, because just because someone changes their gender, it doesn't mean that you should change how you treat them as a human being.
The only way I changed in how I treated Jordan was literally treating him like a man, such as teaching him how to do more physical things. Jordan had to be sat down multiple times during Thanksgiving due to how he was treating people. That had nothing to do with his transition. On top of that, you can see in my messages to him that the way I spoke to him never changed before and after transitioning.
Were there any rule set of things you could or couldn't say, or could or couldn't do?
The rules set for me specifically is that I could not smoke in the house or outside the house or around the house. I was not allowed to even use any of my e-cigarettes or any of my disposables while I was there, because Thomas really tried guilting me into saying that, I can't do it because my family passed away from it. That's not my problem. I'm willing to do what I want. If I paid for it, I'm gonna use it. I also was a bit of a pothead before I moved in with Lio. But at the end of the day, I did stop smoking weed. I did stop using pot or anything THC related, but there was nothing going to stop me from getting nicotine in any way, shape, or form. Not even him. I don't care what he says. When it comes down to nicotine, I'm going to get it. I don't care what he says. But rules set for what I could say? No, not entirely. But it's just, don't disrespect me is really it. And don't lie to me is really all the guidelines were. Just don't disrespect, don't lie. But then rules were pretty strict around what I could intake, like what I could ingest. For example, the vapes. So for me, yeah, I think it was just like, oh, it's for my health.
So there was no sort of like trying to police your speech or anything, saying you couldn't use certain words, saying like, did you ever, and in terms of like disrespect, was it like, in that case, did you sort of have to talk to him in a certain way, otherwise you were like walking on eggshells?
To say I was walking on eggshells, I didn't really. I didn't really walk on eggshells with him in the beginning, but when Peaches came along, that was when the walking on eggshells really, really happened. I felt like I was very restricted at that point. As I said, I was a prisoner of my own making.
Here we have Jay conflating a rule in the house as abuse. I never said she couldn't smoke at all, just that she couldn't in the house. In fact, I remember when we discussed this. We were on the patio, and she asked, "You don't like me smoking, do you?" And I responded, "No, I don't. I watched my grandfather die from lung cancer because of it, and you have a lot of medical issues. I don't like you doing things that will hurt you." Jay is not only trying to frame a rule as abuse and lying about it, but her entire rant here just reeks of entitlement. She was living in someone else's house, rent-free, and was upset that she was expected to not smoke when inside. If you go over to a friend's house for a party and they ask you not to smoke inside, it's common courtesy to abide by those rules because it's their house, not yours. Would she have argued the same thing if I asked her not to wear shoes indoors? What if I'd asked her not to use all the hot water, or leave rotting food in the bedrooms? If this is her standard for abuse, then it calls into question whether or not her accusations are based on the same exaggerated, entitled criteria.
Clearly, Lio has made decisions you disagree with. Which ones do you feel are most important to mention?
The ones that are most important to mention, and I'm saying this to found families out there, never have a favorite in your family. Doesn't matter if they're the youngest, or the oldest, or the middle child. It doesn't matter. You need to share love equally upon your children. Whether they fuck up or not, whether they make a big mistake or not, you still need to show that support. And another one is don't make promises that you cannot for any reason keep. Because that was a big thing that really broke me. Is that Lio made a very big promise to me. And to my father, may he rest in peace, he promised that he would protect me and love me as his own. But he really destroyed that. He really broke that promise. And it was hard for me to really wrap my head around that, to where I would cry for hours just thinking about it. And another thing is, do not for any reason try and scream and yell to intimidate, because all it makes you look is a fool. Just because you are being loud and boisterous doesn't mean that you're better than anyone. It doesn't. You boasting about how you fought someone once and won that fight, that doesn't make you a good person. That doesn't make you strong or badass. You only parade that one story around just to make yourself look cool. And also, when you have your own family there, whether it be your wife, whether it be your found children, do not give your information out as if you're going to fight somebody, knowing that you're going to fight somebody. And just because you think, oh, they're a pussy, it doesn't take away from the fact that you did that yourself, and you potentially put other people in danger. That person, whoever he threatened with a fight, could have come here with a gun, could have done something to any of his children, his wife, but he never considers that because he is a fool for thinking that he's strong enough to take somebody on who has a gun. He has always threatened to fight people, and I think that made him look incredibly idiotic. Because him sharing his information, where he lives, what he does, and all of that, he made himself look like an idiot. He's not a samurai. He's not a ninja. He's not a boxer. He's not a wrestler. He is a normal man. Not even normal. But you need to pretty much just, to those who are listening, don't take anything he says seriously, because he is a moron. I hate to say it like that, but he is not someone you need to be scared of anymore. He just yells and screams and calls people degenerates and retards, and that will take him nowhere.
Interesting statements from Jay, especially since none of these were brought up while she was in my home, especially the stuff about rattling off my info. She always thought that was funny in particular, until it became convenient for it not to be. I also never broke my word to her father. I did take care of her. This is just a weak attempt at guilt tripping.
After speaking about all this, do you still feel safe?
To say that I'm safe, no. I don't. And there's reason for me to say that. He knows me. And the fact that he knows me is scary enough, because he could expose things about me that I've always told him in confidence. That's what I'm scared of. And it's not just him. It's his daughter, his only daughter that he decided to keep because she was worth keeping. I'm not safe. In fact, I am very frightened to even come out with this kind of information, but it needs to be out there that he's not a good person. Never was and never will be. I think that he is an idiot. I do. But it doesn't mean that he's not dangerous to me, because he knows who I am. He doesn't know where I live, thank God. But I am very much scared of him. And I just think that with the friends I've had that have supported me throughout this time, online or in person, those people have been the reason why I was brave enough to come forward and speak on this.
Jay is just outright lying here, not simply because she knows I'd never threaten her or do harm to her, but also because I have an interesting clip from Elite Call where it stated that she was giddy about all of this.
This little instance, combined with the stream, but even outside of the stream of anything having to do with Monstrous, just like the casualness of all of this and almost the giddiness of Lio's demise is disturbing the fuck out of me.
Have you ever worried about at all if there were any repercussions from leaving your family or group, or even speaking about your experience?
Consequences and repercussions, I do believe that there are some. Absolutely, I believe that. But it doesn't take away from the bad that he's done, if not the worst things that he's done to his children that he supposedly loved. He was supposed to care for us, he was supposed to tend to our needs. And what we needed in a father, what we needed as a person, what we needed to become better people. We're not good people, but we wanted to be better. And we thought, for however long it may have been, that we would find that security and that protection within him. And now that we're speaking up on him, I don't know how much that's going to encourage him to speak against us, but also I don't care. If I do face repercussions, I can always turn the other cheek. Because the friends that he has, and the people that he's involved with, they're not anyone to be scared of. Even him, yeah, I'm scared of him, but the consequences for what he's going to do, for what he's going to say, it's not something that is worth my time. My family, and my life, and my friends are worth my time. He is not. His friends are not. Peaches is not. They are not worth my time or energy. They are not even worth my breath.
How can I be a threat as well as not being worth your breath? It makes no sense.
Have you ever witnessed, heard of, or experienced any activity within the Found family that you would describe as abuse?
To witness things like abuse, I could say yes. And most of it is mental, the stuff that I've seen. I had never seen Lio threaten Jordan, but from how Lio portrays himself as a big, violent, scary person, I wouldn't doubt it. And he admitted to it. He admitted that he wanted to slap Jordan. He admitted that he was willing to fight Jordan over nothing. And when it came to Opal leaving, that's Opal's story to tell. But me being a witness to him practically emotionally abusing and begging Opal to stay when she wanted to go, that really broke my heart. And during that Thanksgiving vacation I was on, I do remember having to wake up really early in the morning, around 3 in the morning, to Jordan coming back and sitting next to me and apologizing to me. And I do believe that during that ride, I don't want to make assumptions here, but I feel like this is the time and place for it. Tom was always the one to scream and yell if he had an answer he didn't like. He did that to me. And I feel like he was practically forcing Jordan to apologize to me because we all felt like he was in the wrong because of Hopeless Peach's manipulation in that scenario. And I felt like that was not okay. But now I see it, it's not okay. The abuse in between me and him, there was some, and it's mostly emotional. And it was emotional and mental, and those are two different things to me. because I was dealing with a whole bunch of gaslighting, I was dealing with a whole bunch of yelling and screaming, and just passive aggressiveness during that time. And he called me by my name instead of a nickname he gave me. And I think that was kind of the sign for me that was just like, okay, this means he's done with me. This means he no longer cares for me. I'm gonna walk away with that knowledge. And I wasn't even heartbroken by him saying, you're done, you have to go. But the only thing I was really upset about was the promise he broke. But to discuss abuse, I didn't see much of it to say that... I didn't see much of it, but I could say that the things that I did see, I would consider it to be mental abuse, mental and verbal.
Of course, there's no evidence for these claims. It's almost like it doesn't exist. Jay is also lying about me not calling them their real name, as seen here. Jay essentially says here that she's upset because I didn't pressure Peaches into making up with her. But she's also mad about me pressuring Jordan to apologize. This also goes back to Jay having the expectations that I intervene, but getting upset at me when I do. If Jay didn't have contradictory standards, she wouldn't have any.
Did Lio ever seem to be under stress because of his line of work?
To say that he was stressed from his line of work, no. No. Because Peaches would always be on the phone with him. Even though he's not actually allowed to be doing that in his line of work, he would still talk to her. Every single day, every single hour, every single minute, every single second, she would be with him. So that's the reason why he keeps going. But to say that he's stressed and tired from work, we used to hear it as a joke, because I remember he would come in sometimes and I'd be like, "Hi Dad, how was work?" And he goes, "It was work. How are you feeling? Tired? Why do you ask me that question? Why do you keep asking? You should stop asking me that question if you already know the answer." And he says all of the "I'm tired" jokes, and I thought it's like, it's taken so seriously. But really, no. He has a very easy job now. He got a different position at the job that he once had. Way different position, in fact, where he's able to get home earlier, where he's able to spend more time in his office doing whatever he fucking wants. But, to say that he was stressed from his job, stress, no. Tired, yeah. So, there's that.
How would Jay know if my job is stressful or not? She wouldn't. That's how. Jay literally lived here rent-free and wanted for nothing. But I'm the one that didn't have stress? Spare me. Even if my job hadn't been stressful at the time, is it not possible that in taking in a full-grown adult into the household who is not paying their way, they would then put stress on the only other people in the household paying the bills and buying the food? Jay also brought a pair of pets with her that the wife and I took care of. That's more work and more of a financial strain that Jay contributed nothing to. But as you'll find out later, that's just what Jay does.
Okay. Jordan said to me that he delivers coffee and he does like line art or something for a comic book company. Is that correct?
Yes, that is all correct.
Okay. Nothing else? Maybe he counts his third job as like YouTube or something?
I don't know if he counts YouTube as another job, but he thinks that his vigilantism is a bigger part of his life.
And if so, were there any notable times when someone might have reached out and tried to talk him out of what he does online, like mention he needs to take a step back or get some help?
The only person who successfully talked him down from continuing this kind of career was Hopeless Peaches. I tried talking to him, Jordan's tried talking to him, hell, even his mod team, some of his mod team were telling him he needs to take a step back and just take a break. He would never listen to anybody aside from Hopeless Peaches. Hopeless Peaches was the only person who actually told him during 2023 to take a break. As I said, we've all tried telling him that, but he never listened. If someone was in the comments saying, "You should stop what you're doing and take a break," he would say, "There's no time for a break. I can't stop. There are many other people who are getting hurt." But what can one man do to solve all these problems? What can one man, who is apparently so tired they can barely keep their eyes open aside from taking care of all their toys, what can one man like that do for the internet? Nothing. Because it's vigilantism. I've never been very supportive of vigilantism. I was part of that group, and I found it to be very toxic towards my mindset. And that's why I convinced him to I tried to convince him to leave, but he wouldn't listen to me. The only person who was able to convince him was Hopeless Peaches, and I think that showed the favoritism.
Surprise, surprise, Jay is lying again. The irony of it, though, is that one of the people who pushed me to stop was the man she was dating at the time. The other person was my wife. Also, this isn't vigilantism, and Jay doesn't know what that word means.
Needless to say, his wife probably was one of the people who tried and failed.
I'm not completely sure of that, actually. Oh, okay. I've never heard her try and say anything like that. I can't really pin that, really.
My wife can't enable behaviors I don't have.
I've asked this question to Jordan, but has Lio's wife ever expressed disapproval or frustration with his antics on the internet and all this sort of internet vigilante stuff?
I actually do remember talking to Lio's wife about his antics online. She was very dismissive of it, but the times I would discuss it with her, it was very rare. Because I was more interested in her day and how her day went, because she was willing to open up about it. She was willing to discuss something that wasn't online drama because she never involved herself in that circle. She wanted to be a normal person. She wanted to live a normal life. But now that she's with somebody who is terminally online, she can't have that. Because now she's being pulled into something that she shouldn't have been involved with in the first place. And personally, I still love her too much to let her get hurt. I still love her too much to have her deal with that kind of stress. So maybe that is part of the reason why I talked to her about totally different topics, aside from when I was moving out. Because that was going to be the last time I would ever speak to her again. I haven't really spoken to her much since then, or probably really at all. But I hope that she's doing okay, and I hope that she's happy right now. I talked to her maybe once and then never again. It's hard for me to talk to her because of his influence on her. Well, the influence that he has on her is that they are really in love with each other. They are. I think it's just that I'm scared that she would go to him saying that, she's still talking to me, and he would tell her, that's not our child anymore, you can't talk to her. And that I don't want my relationship with Mrs. Convoy to be tarnished because of him. I still love her. I still care about her. And I want what's best for her. Because she is a wonderful person and doesn't deserve to get treated the way that she does, especially with Lio spending most of his time in his office and barely talking to her throughout the day. She deserves more. She really does. But I can't really speak on her behalf for that, so I won't continue with that.
Jay doesn't respect my wife. If she did, she wouldn't be running around giddily encouraging the same deranged people to take shots at her in their videos. And no, my wife didn't cut contact with Jay because I'm some controlling monster. She doesn't talk to Jay because she knows Jay is a manipulative snake.
What are your thoughts on Lio's impact online? Do you think he creates a positive or negative impact, or somewhere in between?
The impact he has online, it's very mixed, but mostly negative. He tries really hard to portray himself as a predator hunter, but personally, throughout the time I've known him, I really haven't seen many files come up or any reports come up. Nowadays, he's only talking about people that are no longer relevant just because he needs something to talk about. He needs something to discuss. And he's almost become desperate for views and attention, to a point where I believe some people might end up recognizing that. because with the most recent uploads that he's been making, it wouldn't surprise me in the regards of what he used to do and what he does now. He's starting to lose touch on what it means to be a YouTuber, or at least a decent, nice YouTuber, who reaches out to their audience. But the impact he has on his audience is, like, really damning. Because what it does is it gives this weird and almost fucked up perspective on what being a good person is. On what being a good person should, like, on what a good person should do. Because what he does is just bring predators or freaking zoophiles or necrophiles into call just to laugh at them and point at them, but never do anything to have them take accountability, like press charges. And that's not his business to do in the first place. Personally, that's what I think. I thought that what he was doing was for a good cause. For a while, in fact. Now, with the impact that he's making, it's hard for me to take him seriously. It's hard for me to take him seriously online, but seriously in person, even though he's really gross and disgusting, like a full-on neckbeard, he's not... He's just... I have a lot of mixed feelings on that. But the impact he makes on his channel, it's mixed, but mostly negative. And I think that people need to start realizing that he is not a good person at all. He's just fucked up in the head.
Jay claims to never be around me, but wants to comment on whether or not I filed reports? More contradictions. As far as whether or not my impact is positive or negative, that's up to the people I've tried to help. Jay was literally taken care of by me and put in my home rent-free. Although by now, I'd consider that a negative.
How involved were you with the Senate?
I was involved with the Senate just enough to be friends with some of the mods. Like, some of the mods were very close friends of mine, in fact. Maybe one of them was. I've even met somebody who treated me really good in the server. But we had to leave because, well, of how Lio was treating us in person. He treated us like garbage. But the impact I had on the Senate, I was friends with a few mods, but since I left, there is no impact. They really didn't care much that I left, and I don't care that they don't care. I just wanted to move on with my life and just live something, like, at least of some semblance of normalcy. Because I didn't really have a normal life ever since I joined the Senate, because everyone was screaming, everyone was laughing at people, and just being overall bullies, and I've never been the person to really enjoy that. Like, you know, some girls are just like, I don't like drama, but I'm here for the tea, I'm listening to it. Like, I'd be there to listen to it and laugh to myself about it, but it's not really great. But when it comes to the Senate, I didn't really have much of an impact. I was just another artist, and no one really even knew that I was one of Lio's kids during the time, and frankly, I don't care. That is their problem.
Jay likes to act like no one in Senate knew they were family, but people knew. She always made a show of it. As far as her impact, she absolutely had one. We actually had to put in an auto-ban rule for people who threatened their own lives in the server because of someone Jay decided to toy around with without telling us. And let me tell you, being in a call with a bunch of people, held hostage by a dude with a loaded shotgun threatening to traumatize everyone, wasn't a fun experience. Thankfully, I used an instance of him being distracted to get everyone but me to bail from the call, so I could be the only one to deal with it in case he went through with it.
Hey Arjun, can I talk to you for a minute, buddy?
I think he's on the phone, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I want every single person in this call to keep your mouth shut. In fact, every single person in this call, leave. Just gonna be me and Argent.
But Jay never thinks of the impact of her actions.
Do you feel that Thomas has taught you anything valuable or important?
To say that he taught me things... No. He never really taught me anything. I would learn really bad toxic traits from him. It was, I had to be strong. I had to stop crying. It was things that he portrayed about himself. It was things that he would say about himself. And I would put that into my own beliefs, and I think that was my biggest issue. He never really taught me anything else, though, no.
I am not responsible for someone else actively taking on traits of mine that I've told them not to. That is all.
Do you feel Lio is fit as a parent, in your opinion?
To say that Lio is fit as a parent is a literal joke. He is a joke of a human being, and to claim himself as a good father, that's a laugh. It really is. Because the reason why I say that is because look at what he's done to his 3 kids that he intentionally pretty much left behind for one. It shows favoritism, it shows abuse, and I really don't think that any of that should have been justified. None of it should have been, because he always said that we should fight for each other through thick and thin, but there were times that we were so fed up with fighting that we just had to give up. That he literally gave up on us before we gave up on each other. And that is his biggest flaw. And I would not be surprised if he ever heard this, he would come crawling back saying, I love you, I miss you, please come back, but it is too late for that. It is too late for him, because he has proven time and time again that he is not fit to be a parent. He is not fit to be an adopted father. He is not fit to be a biological father if he were to have his own kids. Because if anything, I learned this. He is going to throw anyone out that is not valuable to him. That is not valuable to his beliefs. That is not valuable in general. He has proven that if you are no longer of value, he will toss you aside and get the next best thing. And that, in general, is just god-awful. And I think that's something he should be ashamed of himself for. And with this, going forward, I am going to be a good parent. Because of how he treated me, I'm going to be a good parent. I am going to be good to my kids. He is not going to be a better parent than me. I am definitely going to prove him wrong on that front. And I sure as shit am already.
I never threw anyone out for the next best thing. That is literally projection on Jay's part. It's what she always does herself. Jay's an abusive, deranged lunatic with a pattern of vindictive actions after she's been cut off. Be very careful if you wind up with a space around her. She's going to use people. It's who she is. While others here are also warped and sick, Jay is one of the most dangerous. Because she's been at this for a while. Some of you in older commentary may be wondering if this person, filter or not, sounds familiar. That's because she does. She used to date someone by the name of Deviant Cringe, when she went by the name of Bula Taurus, Patricia Pink, or Baby Blue Bones. See, after her breakup with Cringe, she started dating Jar. All this is just testimony, so take it with a grain of salt if you want, but while dating Jar, she tried to get Jar to make a video on Deviant Cringe. That's based on Jar's recollection, and the man hasn't lied to me yet, so I'm inclined to believe him, as well as the fact that it repeats with other people. Keep in mind, Jar talks to a lot of people and forgets things, so this might be wrong even if he is telling the truth. After they weren't with Jar, they went to Ponder for the same thing as detailed above. She even went to me to try to get me to cover Jar for allegedly cheating on her. Riveting stuff. Didn't know Jar had that level of riz. Here's Jar's statement about her.
Hey, this is Jar. I don't have much of an idea of what LioConvoy is going to say in this video. I'm just here to talk about my ex Sugar and that's it. Throughout my years on YouTube, I've received a lot of allegations, usually about being racist, sexist, being into kids, or doing things to my 9-year-old niece, which I don't have. But I don't really have the time to respond to every single allegation that is made about me. But since Sugar is relevant to this video, I might as well talk about my experience with her. Sugar would constantly tell me things that I found very hard to believe. Sugar told me that if I ever came to visit her, I shouldn't get a hotel because one time she saw this guy jump from a hotel roof, and when he hit the ground, his blood splattered on her and no one else. Now, I have no proof for this claim, so please take it with a grain of salt. But she would also constantly beg me to be in an open relationship with her. I ain't no cuck, so I said no. But after she begged me for this for about the 3rd time, I suspected that she was cheating on me. So I broke up with her, and months later, later, I got with someone else. Now, I'm not saying that she did cheat on me, just that I suspected that she did. However, I definitely did not cheat on her. Now, of course, there's no way I can disprove that I cheated on her. Granted, she can't prove it herself, but I also can't disprove it. But listen to my voice, listen to my speech patterns. Do I really sound like a guy with enough riz to cheat on a woman? Get real. Now, despite Sugar having absolutely no proof for this allegation, a lot of people have spread it around. It's a little upsetting that people actually believed I cheated on a partner. But it's also slightly flattering at the same time. Oh, don't trust your girlfriend around Jar. That guy has been with 29 women all at the same time.
This is just who Jay is. It's gross and disturbing. This person lived in my home, chilling. Patchwork Heart is a former associate of mine, a person I've helped multiple times through several struggles of theirs, financial, emotional, even social. However, the moment they heard something bad about me, even with no evidence, they sent me a message on Discord in the most dramatic way possible, refused to hear my side of the situation, then published this video. So let's get into it.
The assertions as they have been made are thus: verbal abuse, gaslighting, intimidation, favoritism, emotional invalidation, and even disowning his children for not getting along with Hopeless Peaches, his last remaining daughter.
I find it interesting that Patch will make a video on me based on allegations, not facts, just statements. Meanwhile, in the past, they've not done that. One example is the Piss Gremlin with this famous clip.
I said that I apologize to Anthony for you falsely accusing him of
Oh, I never said that. I never said
yes,
that.
you did, and Vita and I both have proof that you said that he might have given you STDs and he might have gotten you pregnant. Yeah,
might have.
That's an accusation.
Yeah,
that's
no, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. What I said is my friend asked me one day with certain situations if a certain type of position happened. I'm not going to get into the details, and I said my friend had me get a pregnancy test just in case, and I didn't know. But that's not a lie.
You also, went on a tirade trying to ruin FNGR's reputation with accusations of sexual assault and sexual manipulation.
Yeah, and he and I fixed it.
Yeah, but it was still horse that I believed.
It was.
I believed you.
I
and
believed
it made
it
me
too.
look like an
I believed you too.
So believing someone's claim of in-person assault isn't enough to make a video on the alleged offender, but making a video of an allegation of a much lower caliber is enough? Maybe Patch has changed their stance since then, but I find it hard to believe at this point.
When I was shown these allegations by a friend of mine who knew me back in my own pred hunting days, I nearly broke apart at the seams. I reached out to Jordan, with whom I had always endeavored to be a supportive uncle for, and he admitted that he had been afraid to tell me the way his so-called father was treating him. I have met Jordan in real life a few times. I have had the blessing to hug that boy and tell him in person how much he means to me. A boy who I adore, who I would go to jail for. He knows this. He knows I would do anything for him and his siblings, especially him and Opal, who I have known the longest.
Thanks for letting everyone know right out the gate that you can't be objective, Patch. Look, I get when people are wrapped around a situation or the people they're in, but coming out and making these statements when you have zero evidence is asinine. See, I know this because Jordan stated in a call I was past that they never actually even talked to Pat.
They are claiming is verbal and psychological abuse. Fucking Patch is claiming it. And Patch is in direct contact with you. You have seen them in real life, to what I know. And
we met up.
They are using you as the main reason as to why they are no longer speaking to Lio because of the conversations that you two had. Okay? They are claiming that you have been abused publicly.
Wait, because of the conversations me and Patch had?
Yeah.
I haven't talked to Patch for well over a year until this. They commented on my post, and that's about it.
Jordan, they made a video that I'm pretty sure you retweeted.
I did, but we hadn't been in contact until all of this shit went down.
I am not saying I don't even know what you're saying right now. What I'm saying is, Patch has said that what Lio has done is abusive and have used your conversation as a recounting of it, of you talking to them, saying how you were scared about like going public and all of this and all of this shit.
Oh, okay, that part. Okay, I was confused. I thought you meant that I had been talking to Patch, and that's
no, not a recording, not a screenshot. I'm saying they are using their account of what your conversation was with them as, for lack of a better term, evidence against Lio.
Patch is overstating what type of conversation was even had.
I have always been their biggest cheerleader, and even knowing that I would move mountains for him, Jordan was too scared of Thomas to tell me. I'm not just an uncle, I'm a father myself. I have a daughter named Forrest, who is just about Jordan's age.
Yes, Patch, your kid that you let move in was someone you knew had a sexually abusive past. That being Blake Diamond. While he lied to you about the exact details, it was still something you knew.
The amount of times Yodi had to talk me down from driving to Washington and beating your face in myself. You convinced me that you were getting better, that you regretted what you did in high school, that you knew you needed help.
I do regret it. I
And
do know
why
that I
did you
need
put your hands on her when she told you no?
And you saw no issue with.
I took her in a very long time ago, when her biological parents were neglecting her emotionally, psychologically, and even physically in some ways. When her ex-boyfriend was abusing her, I took a train all the way to Seattle to confront Blake and help Forrest and her then-partner Digi escape. I would do anything for my daughter. She's a published author and an amazing young woman who makes me insanely proud. And as not only Thomas's brother, but as a fellow parent, I am repulsed by what he has done here. You made a promise to be these kids' father, but you don't know what being a parent is, Thomas. Being a father is staying up until 4 in the morning because your kid had another nightmare or PTSD episode and they need you to hold them until the fear passes. Being a father is learning all your kids' safe foods because they're autistic and have texture issues, and if they don't have safe foods in the house, they might not eat at all. Being a father is teaching your child that it's okay to have emotions and be emotional, but also teaching them how to regulate those feelings and not let those emotions rule their heart and their choices. Helping them learn how to file taxes or change a flat tire. It's teaching your daughter how to throw a punch, teaching your son gun safety. It's dancing at your child's wedding and holding a funeral for their fucking childhood dog if they ask you. But more than anything, fatherhood is sacrifice. Because kids aren't supposed to be obedient, or pliable, or grateful. Kids are supposed to eat your food, break your heart, make mistakes, and hopefully, with your help, become a person who leaves the world better than it was when they came into it. You're not a father, Thomas.
Patch here is essentially trying to pull themselves up as though they're the superior parent, all while framing the actions primarily around how you deal with a minor. But since they want to try that, we can. I opened my home to these people rent-free, took care of their pets, devoted my time to them when they were mentally unwell, and did everything to help them, even when I wasn't fully versed in how to do so. Meanwhile, what did Patch do? Patch let their family move in with a sexual deviant, and when things got ugly, resorted to making goofy threats with a friend of theirs, citing to defeat some sort of alien Hitler. Stated here.
The entirety here, I'll go ahead and give you a real quick overview. The National Trafficking isn't going to care about some random threat of pimping, but without showing proper intent. And just to put a TLDR here, and I'm trying as hard as I can not to be offensive when I say this. but having screen caps of somebody saying that they fought alien Hitler, the cops are just going to think that this is make-believe.
Ozzy's dissociative identity disorder is formally documented.
I get that, but
Dave is a fictive interject. It is complicated.
I know it's complicated. My point is the police aren't going to care about that. They're just going to see that.
That wasn't one of the documents sent to the police. That is a separate folder that I have privately.
Patch and their crew were too busy making crazy Google Docs and having LARP battles with Blake to get business done. Which is why it felt to me like it always did when Patch was involved. No, Patch, you don't get to try and run victory laps while not mentioning your shortcomings.
Additionally, this impropriety you have with Rose is appalling, Thomas. Cooing at a 24-year-old woman like she's 9 in front of strangers on live stream. Actively keeping her past of misconduct from the public, a luxury you never afforded Jordan, by the way.
I didn't hide anything. Not that Patch would know. But they can't do dramatic grandstands if they had a real conversation, could they? We'll talk about the FCK stuff later, but I want to hammer something in. If the others do have things I'm hiding, how would Patch know? But let me get into the thing that pisses me off. Patch, you have zero right to make claims of infidelity against me. Not only because there's no evidence of it because it didn't happen, but also because of your willful affair with Lily Orchard. And yes, I know Lily coerced you into doing certain art, but they can't coerce you into an affair. That was a 100% willful choice on your end.
What in the 9 circles of hell is wrong with you? You literally, on a live stream, humiliated Jordan with Vita and Jace for being repeatedly targeted by pedophiles when he was a child. Something I disagreed with then and still disagree with now.
I won't deny that I was out of line in that stream. However, for all of Patch's posturing now, there was none of it in the live chat during the stream or in the comment section. Patch is only dragging this out now because they need straws to grasp at. This is also something I had long since apologized to Jordan for. Multiple times.
And now, you hide screenshots of Peaches doing far worse for months. You will humiliate and shame a child for things they can't control, but shield a fully grown adult woman from the consequences of her actions.
Here we can see that Patch doesn't even have a clue about what's going on. And why would they? That would take actually looking into things instead of rushing off to make a video on impulse. If Patch is so condemning of someone not having a filter around kids, I wonder when they'll make a video on themselves.
What am I meant to do with that, Thomas? Where is the man who encouraged me to publicly take accountability for everything that I had done? The mistakes that I had made when I was in Zoophile Police, forgetting to censor certain screenshots before I published them, or getting too personal with cases and getting too emotionally involved. Where's the man who helped me take accountability for the art that I was coerced into making? Where's that man? I don't see him.
Still here, still holding my values. But that's not convenient for Patch's video, and wouldn't allow for the anime speech they're giving here. I'll give you an example. Years ago, Patch was coerced into drawing zoo porn for Lily, because Patch needed the money. So I convinced Patch to go public about it and encourage them to give the money they made to other artists in need. The latter bit I actually did for them since they're always destitute. So what's worse, not having a filter around kids or drawing zoo porn because you needed the money? I'm being consistent in the understanding I'm showing.
One by one, I have watched the people who claimed to share my goals be outed as monsters or fools. Vita turned out to be a groomer and a predator. Coyote lost the plot, and now I don't recognize him anymore. Cass Warfox, there are not enough words in the English language to express that disaster. And now, this. This repulsive circus of cockery.
So Patch puts alleged verbal abuse on the same level as predation and other terrible things. Love the consistency here because the other people listed absolutely have evidence to the allegations against them. These situations aren't similar, but Patch will put them together like they are.
Dishonore su di te, fratello. You have brought shame on everything we built together. I hope, I pray to every god and every devil in this world and the next that this is the last time I have to say anything about anyone. The fact that I have to sit here and condemn my own brother.
Patch didn't have to do anything. This is a choice he made based on literally nothing of substance.
Well, you're not my brother anymore, are you? I may issue additional statements about this as more information comes out.
You mean the truth?
As the full version of Jordan's interview is yet to be published, and I have yet to see very many other statements come forward aside from that interview and the clips that I have seen, as well as Jordan's public statement on Twitter. So as new information arrives, I will adjust my statement or expand upon it.
Bet you won't.
I wanted this to be a misunderstanding. But until I see proof that I've been played the fool, I am choosing to believe the kids that have come forward and stand by them.
Patch here flatly admits that they're willing to assume guilt without evidence, and happily, going so far as to essentially say that I have to prove a negative. A logical fallacy. Patch's entire video is nothing short of attention-seeking and disgusting.
Now, if you'll excuse me, it has taken me 6 takes to be able to get through this entire script without crying. So I'm gonna go have a smoke.
It took Patch 6 takes to put out something as bad as this. Not that I'm surprised at this point, but to Patch, based on your own standards, if someone makes a video on you based on literally nothing, then people should just run with it. And unlike all the other times they've been in similar situations like that, I'll no longer be there to bail them out. Jordan, once going by the online alias Mintheart, is someone I helped get away from predators in multiple instances. The most well-known one being the case of Joshua Vida. After turning 18, Jordan moved to Nebraska in 2021. However, it was made clear that he couldn't be left to live by himself due to some attempts. I brought him into my family and opened up my home to him. Even though he had some severely problematic behavior before and after coming here, I did my best to take care of him. However, due to his actions later on, I had to remove him from my family unit and told him I needed to find another place to live. Shortly after that, Jordan would team up with Kumo to press forth some ideas that I'm an abuser. When this all came to a head, people on the server were asking about it and I gave them some answers. This further riled up Jordan and their desire to cause damage. When Kumo's first video came out, Jordan commented positively on it, despite it being factually incorrect even about their own grooming. This is something Sarah would later call out in her own response, and this would cause Jordan to release a video of his own, hoping to avoid the backlash of his own irresponsible actions. That's what we're covering first here.
This is going to be very bare bones and dry, because I just need to get everything out of the way and said and done. I'm tired of this, tired of how everything is playing out and unhappy with how it's being turned into a game or theatrics for some. I'm going to try my best to not get emotional and to keep it to the facts of the situation. But if I slip up, please understand that this is a very emotional time for me and a sensitive topic.
Jordan calling his video bare bones is fair. There's no meat to anything he says in the entire thing. I find it interesting that Jordan is frustrated with how things are shaping up, despite him knowing what the people pushing this are like.
My name is Jordan. I used to go by Mintheart, and I used to live with LioConvoy Reviews. My time there wasn't a good one, but it also wasn't all bad. He helped me with a lot of breakdowns when I first moved to Texas, comforted and talked me through a lot of things. However, after my transition in early 2022, things started to change. I have seen the word abuse thrown around a lot, and while I never used it, people seem to think that's what I'm claiming.
Yes. Now, this is after Jordan made it clear privately in calls that he wasn't claiming abuse, and had to be walked through the fact that retweeting posts calling me one was the same as saying it himself.
And you retweeted the video, so you are claiming abuse. When you're retweeting tweets saying Lio abused Jordan, that's you claiming that he abused you.
guess.
No, there's
I didn't
no
really
I guess.
think about it. Fuck.
You need to start thinking about it, Jordan. Do you not understand the implications of all of this?
Jordan will take whatever stance that'll get him the least heat in the company he's in.
Let me be clear about that right now. Lio wasn't physically or sexually abusive. And yes, I have to clarify because a lot of people who hate him seem to think there was romantic or sexual intentions or relationships going on, and there weren't any. Lio was, however, verbally abusive. That's it. He would yell at me and berate me, humiliate me in front of people, and was overall treating me like I was another one of the people in his videos.
Jordan is telling an absolute lie here. He's seriously trying to say I treated him the same way I do the freaks and scumbags in my videos. This is because Jordan knows it's the only point of reference people will have, and it paints the worst of possible pictures. However, Jordan neglects to mention that my wife was also in the house. And frankly, if that were the case, you can be sure that my wife would have taken issues with it.
There was an incident where he had a call with me, his wife, Peaches, and one of my other siblings as well. He proceeded to scream at me and rip me apart in front of them. And when I got emotional and started to cry, he told me to stop throwing a tantrum. I don't even remember what it was that sparked this call, but I don't think that I deserve to be humiliated and screamed at like that in front of everyone. And when his wife got home and I was forced to go downstairs with her, still in tears and being berated, he got mad at me when I flinched away from her touching my arm. They assumed I thought she was going to hit me. In reality, I just didn't want to be touched, and was severely mentally and emotionally overwhelmed.
Jordan's emotional issues only cropped up when he was in trouble or when he needed something. He wants to blame everything on his emotional status while ignoring the cognitive decisions he made.
I won't go into every fight we had. They're not really important. I only bring that one up as an example of his behavior towards me. But a giant turning point was Thanksgiving of 2022. I was still very emotional and hurt, and I was absolutely acting like, for lack of a better term, an asshole. I was cold, I was distant, and I was angry from the treatment I was receiving and didn't want to partake in the festivities. Tensions were at an all-time high, and with the siblings visiting, everything was just not great. I had lightened up a bit when they were there, but even that was going downhill very fast, with Opal leaving early, no longer wanting to be in the family. And then Hopeless Peaches, for whatever reason, said that I hadn't wanted Pink in the family, which tarnished my relationship with them for months and led to an even worse Thanksgiving that was ultimately blamed on me.
If Jordan admits that he caused trouble, then why would he be upset that the situation he caused would be blamed on him? Not that it's even true, mind you. Jordan may have been spoken to when he made false allegations towards me or when he was outed for being a jerk to Jay, but the entirety of the bad experience wasn't ever blamed on him. And Peaches didn't lie to anyone about what Jordan said, because Peaches wouldn't even have known that Jordan said that if it wasn't said around him to begin with. Jordan wants to pretend I wasn't there for these conversations, but I was, and I know he's lying.
2022 ended on a terrible note, and 2023 was about to start in much the same way. Lio and Peaches were constantly having fights, and often she came to one of us to vent about it. It's largely irrelevant, but this is the only situation I'll bring up as it has some relevance. After this particular one, I had gotten home to the wife and Pink on the phone together. I asked what was going on and they filled me in. Peaches and Lio had gotten into another fight. She was hurt and upset, and it seemed like everyone was on his side about it. I talked to her, as she had sent me a message while I was working, and she gave me her side of things as well and told me she had taken a lot of pills. This is where I fucked up. She said he knew she had a relapse with self-harm earlier that week, and I took it to mean that Lio already knew that she had taken pills and was sick. However, he didn't know, and that's where I got taken to task for not telling him. When we got to that conversation about the event and how no one had told him, I felt sick, because I had known and was under the assumption he knew, so I had said nothing. As much as I dislike Peaches, I don't want her dead, and I felt terrible after that.
Whether Peaches and I fought was irrelevant. Jordan knew what Peaches had done and chose to say nothing. As for him feeling terrible about it, I don't believe him. At all. Because even after that, Jordan actively tried to avoid and shut out Peaches when it came to spending time.
But Lio and Peaches have never accepted or believed that I misread what she told me. They don't have to, but it's the truth of the matter, no matter what they say. I misread it, and I fucked up, and I am sorry.
Jordan's sorry, despite doing nothing to make up for it. This is a typical Jordan staple.
Things continued to be tense, and then came the disowning. It happened in mid-October. I got home from work and was asked to talk to them. Lio took me to task on everything. My behavior, things I had thought were done and over with like Thanksgiving, why I never talked to or tried to be friends with Peaches, a lot of stuff. The entire time, Peaches was on the phone with him, listening in and feeding him questions.
Peaches didn't feed me questions to ask. I'll explain later why he was there at all, but I felt the need to state that outright. On top of that, Jordan wants to pretend like his removal from the family unit was some massive shock that came out of nowhere, like he was abandoned and left out on his own. But he wasn't. See, while I'm not going to claim that Jordan may not have some sort of mental issue that day, but it certainly didn't last all day. And I have evidence of that. Here we see Jordan messaging their best friend on that day without issue. Not even a mention of his mental struggles. So when it comes to Jordan not telling Peaches happy birthday, Jordan was laying on the couch messing around with his iPad. I told him that he should wish Peaches a happy birthday, and he found literally every excuse to not do so. From citing that his phone is upstairs, to stating that he didn't have Discord on his tablet, the works. He just didn't care, and didn't want to. Something we also see in the screenshot he sent his best friend the day Peaches cut him off. And what do we also see in that screenshot? Jordan saying he doesn't see any of us as family. Jordan was checked out in November of 22, then again in September of 2023, before I disconnected him from it in October of 2023. Jordan, like most of them, wanted all the benefits of being in the family unit while putting in none of the work. Everything had to revolve around him. In the final conversation we had, I told him he had until the end of March to find a new place to live. That's 5 months he could have saved up with his full-time job. Instead, he left on Christmas with a quirky little note, after apparently talking to weirdos he knew had issues with me while in my own home still. Jordan didn't leave because I cruelly kicked him out. He left because the free ride was over. Otherwise, he would have left back in September.
I wish I had the screenshot, but she gloated about the whole event on Twitter and sent me quite a nasty text the next morning. I left in December, and then things started to blow up.
I find it interesting how few people read this screen cap, because while it's true that Jordan himself didn't IP trace a kid, he absolutely helped Neko Coda terrorize some kids over a beef they had with another kid that Coda wanted to protect. That's why Jordan got this message. While it can be said that Peaches does hold grudges, in this case, it's over something that happened.
Lai will say I sought out Gilded Pooh and Kumo commentary, two people he and Peaches have argued with and condemned. This is not the truth. I saw Gilded's video and was in his comments correcting things, to which Kumo reached out and asked if I would talk to him in order to clear things up. This all happened in December, a whole 2 months after I was disowned. Lai will say I also knew exactly what Pooh and Kumo had done, but in reality, I didn't know. I had heard their names, but I didn't know what they had done. After Kumo responded to my comment, I even had to look up who he was because I had no clue. And in my first call with Kumo, we discussed it, and Pooh, and I looked at all the evidence he gave me and came to my own conclusion on the matter.
In the DMs Jordan showed on the screen, he makes it obvious that he knows full well what Kumo did. Of course, I also told him while he lived here, the same with Gilded Pooh. So Jordan looked at that little weirdo that had a girl cut for him who also allied himself with Zoo defending Fox Mafia, as well as the weirdo that's cool with owning zoo porn, and said it's all fine. That absolutely demonstrates that Jordan has no issue with the wrongs others have committed so long as it serves his purpose.
Our original intentions for the call were to clear up misunderstandings. I told Kumo I didn't want him to release anything until after I left Lio's home. I didn't want to deal with what would come of me talking to him while living there, and yes, I was scared. I should have either issued a public statement or made a video like I am now instead of how things have been playing out so far. But hindsight is 20/20. I never meant for it to get like this, and at this point I'm simply exhausted.
If Jordan was concerned with this getting out of hand, he wouldn't have allowed his story to be used by these people. This was intentional. It's why he's framing it the way he is. Jordan has a pattern of starting problems when he's mad, only to backtrack the moment it blows back on him.
Let's get into some of the irrelevant things Lio is now bringing up. Him bringing up my mental health and an incident that has literally nothing to do with any of this, but I know why he brought it up. I'll read the screenshots that are relevant to it. We could also get into Patch's obsession with diagnosing people, including one time he tried to gaslight Jordan into thinking he had DID. Jordan essentially used the diagnosis to give him an excuse to say unhinged things to people without being held accountable for it. Following the Vita stuff, I was severely mentally unwell. My depression and ideation were at an all-time high and I was frequently self-harming. It got to a point where I was hearing voices in my head, voices that were not my own and that I didn't know. It freaked me the fuck out, and I went to Patch to talk about it because they have knowledge and experience on stuff like that. They guided me through it, and I came to learn the names of these two voices, Oliver and Victoria. Oliver was a guardian, constantly my voice of reason through my breakdowns and bad mental times, and he'd take over if I was shutting down too badly. Victoria was the opposite. She was born from the rage of losing Vita and a life that she thought was good. She was cold, harmful, and trying to rip apart the people she blamed for me losing contact with Vita. Yes, a lot of fucked up shit was said and done during that time, and I regret it all. After this, I spent almost 2 years trying very, very, very hard to ignore their voices and block it from my memory. I told myself if I just believed they weren't real, they would stop. They didn't until I was starting to become more stable, at which point the voices went away.
I'm not a medical professional, but I've gotten the same answers from all the ones I've consulted. DID does not disappear when you wind up in a more stable environment. If it were that easy, then solving that wouldn't be so troublesome for so many people. Jordan making this claim only further makes the people who genuinely suffer from that look like they're faking something. DID isn't your shield to act unhinged to people without consequences, Jordan. And yes, that's what Jordan did. They used the alleged DID to say unhinged garbage to people, knowing they could use it as a shield if called on it.
As well as the false claims that I spent $600 a month on Ubers. I live in Texas, a state with 0 sidewalks and where it's overwhelmingly hot in the middle of summer. He wanted me to walk to work, and me not wanting to do that would take rides to work instead. It was $400 a month, $200 out of every paycheck, and that stopped after I did get a bike to pay the rent they were asking for. He claims the other $200 went to Uber Eats. This is an exaggeration. I spent about $200 on groceries, and when I could swing it, I would get food ordered. Most of the time I got food ordered was when I was exhausted and too tired to cook, and it happened when they were home, so go figured it looked like a lot.
Let's assume I'm wrong about how much Jordan spent on Uber, apparently by $200. But the point is still the point. He prioritized being lazy over paying rent and getting business handled. And I hate that I have to put it out like that, but that's what it is. I never told Jordan to just walk. I told him for the better part of a year to get a bike. He worked 5 miles from my house, sidewalk or not. It's safe enough to bike, as many people do that exact same thing on that exact same road every day. In our final conversation, I asked Jordan why he hadn't bought a bike. His exact answer was, I couldn't be bothered to. There's also the fact that Jordan took advantage of a friend's kindness to pay their rent instead of just biking to work. Granted, that person doesn't want to be named, so take that with a grain of salt. But Jordan paying $200 a month for their own room, their own bathroom, and utilities and Wi-Fi isn't some horrific amount to ask.
Lai will say I'm doing all this for attention. That's not true. If I was looking for attention, I would have immediately blasted this everywhere the moment I was out of his home, and got to people who I know for a fact despise him and have far bigger platforms than Kumo does. This isn't for attention. This isn't because I love drama and want to cause people issues. This has blown up far more than I wanted and has gone to lengths that are becoming childish. And for some part of it, I am to blame.
We'll talk about how dumb this choice is when I go over the people Jordan ran to.
Kumo did a stream about a week ago at the time of this recording, and the way I conducted myself in that stream was not okay. I was very angry. So much so that I was barely thinking clearly. Lio spreading nothing but lies about me was upsetting, but I should have kept a cool head instead. It's becoming far too personal and petty, as opposed to just saying my piece and moving on. So, with this video, I'm doing exactly that, which I should have done from the beginning. After this, I'm not going to engage in other talks about it. If people have questions or need more clarification, I'm willing to give it. I might even do my own stream to clear up other things, but I will not be appearing in other streams or commenting on this further. I'm tired and just want it done with.
Jordan, of course, didn't want this over with. He was seeing in streams these people have done even after this video dropped, further fanning the flames of all this. You can't get mad that a fire is spreading when you keep throwing gasoline on it, Jordan.
Lio, I know this will get back to you. You said I likely wouldn't want to talk to you, but you're wrong. Despite what you think, I'm far more open to communication and being an adult to hash things out than you give me credit for. But I'm not doing it in Senate. You want to talk? You have my number. Text or call me, we can set it up to be in private. Just you and me. Otherwise, it won't happen. With all that being said, I'm going to end the video now. I'm sorry if this was a mess, or if I left things unexplained. I tried to make it as straightforward as I could, and I've never been the greatest at writing scripts or making videos.
Jordan can posture about maturity here if it makes him feel better, but we both know that's not the case. Jordan, you spread public claims using individuals you knew were both unsavory and with a bias against me. I'm not obligated to give you a private discussion. There won't be one at all, in fact. I didn't want to have to embarrass you, but you put me in a position where I have to respond to you. I hope your moments of impotent rage because someone held you accountable and told you to pay rent were worth it. Now, there's more Jordan has said, but we'll have to go a bit back in time to address it. This is in Kumo's preview video. Something behind a paywall now. Classy.
She does. I think she has 2 firearms at this point.
That's good.
He owns swords.
Actually, on the subject of her, how does she feel about his online antics?
She doesn't like him at all.
Oh.
And that's because he spends almost every moment of his free time in his office on the internet doing nonsense.
Okay. Has she ever taken issue with how he baby talks to Peaches and some of the others?
I don't know. We've never really talked about it.
I've heard people try to say otherwise, that his wife is perfectly fine with it and knows about all this nonsense.
Jordan wouldn't have a clue about how my wife feels or thinks about anything in this matter, because my wife isn't of the opinion that she should talk to some 20-year-old about what she may not like concerning her own husband. Truth is, the main problem my wife had with my predator hunting was the exhaustion and destruction it would do to me and my mental health. Jordan trying to cast doubt on whether or not my wife knows or approves of what I do is flatly a form of manipulation.
And I think it's also safe to assume...
Doesn't she's okay with it.
From the top to the bottom, on the top I start. Let's see here. Love that Kumo is so bad at questioning that he makes it obvious when he's asking leading ones. Makes things easier to deal with, honestly. My wife can hear literally everything I say in this room. It's directly connected to our bedroom. As far as the baby talk goes, if I did, who cares? This is stupid.
Not very likely. I'll let you know a little secret. Lio disowned me, thus that it does not get shared until after January 3rd.
Okay.
Because January 3rd is the day that I'm moving out, and Lio does not know that because I have not told him, and I don't plan on telling him.
Okay. Was there a particular reason he disowned you?
It had to do with...
Sorry if that's
situations.
Too big of a question.
It's very complicated. So, as you know, Hopeless Peaches is also one of... yeah. So there's Hopeless Peaches, who is now his only ejected, and she and I did not get along. We had a lot of fights.
He disowned you over that?
It's because I'm not a good person. I'm not like the perfect person, but nobody is. No, I have a lot of problems, a lot of mental issues. And last year around Thanksgiving and Christmas, it was particularly bad. I was very cold with people. I was lashing out a lot. I was just being an asshole.
I mean, who else did you have to model yourself after?
You're funny because it's funny because it's true. But long story short, I was a bit too much of an asshole. I hurt her too many times, I guess, by not talking with her. I didn't wish her a happy birthday because I was having a PTSD episode.
I already debunked all of this, outing Jordan as a liar. Moving on. So I'm going to take a bit and talk about how it was having Jordan here. I tried my best to take care of him. Through mental unwellness, nightmares, all of it. When he tried to self-harm, we made sure he was safe and put sticky notes all over his bathroom to let him know that he's loved, and that he could reach out to us. When he had meltdowns, I dropped everything to go to him. One such example is still on my channel, the Halo stream, where I went AFK for an extended period. That's because Jordan had a meltdown and I needed to be there for him. Jordan wasn't abused in my household. He was taken care of. His claims of transphobia are also bunk. The only difference was me trying to teach him how to do more masculine things. Gender affirming, not destructive. The truth is, Jordan started manufacturing all of this when he stopped being the center of attention. This includes actively lying about things that went on in my household to paint me as a bad person to others. One such example is when he stubbornly didn't want to get another job after quitting his previous one with no notice. We were on the porch, and I asked him what he wanted to do. He says he wants to get by on commissions. I told him that while that's a fine goal to work to, his siblings were at a higher skill level and even they struggled to find commissions often. I coached it in a way that was supportive, but also let him know it was a goal to be reached. When alone though, Jordan would retell the story as malicious, that I was telling him that his art sucked and to give up. This wasn't the only case either. One time I had a heart-to-heart with Jordan about Peaches, letting him know that Peaches had been through similar things, and that they should be there for each other. This, however, morphed into me telling Jordan that Peaches went through worse, so his trauma didn't matter. When it comes to some of the worst of it though, that would be when Jordan had a major depressive episode, when he decided to down an entire bottle of ibuprofen in June of 2022. My wife rushed him to the hospital while I rushed to get there myself. When I arrived, Jordan was trying to make a joke about all of this. This could have been a coping mechanism, yes, but my wife was terrified. She'd never dealt with anything like that before. So I told her to head home while I stayed with Jordan. I was there for 7 hours, telling him how much we cared, and that nothing he went through was worth his life, that adversity could be overcome, and that I believed in him. I wasn't angry with the fact that he slipped into ideation, but I did have him apologize for scaring my wife so badly. If that were it, I wouldn't have mentioned it, but unfortunately Jordan decided their ideation was a joke. One day in February of 2023, I got a message from a boy he was flirting with named Chrome, telling me that Jordan was in danger trying to find a bridge. I was worried, of course, and went directly to his room, where Jordan answered it, trying to hold back laughter. Jordan thought my love and care was a joke to be mocked, no matter what. I know I told this story in that Senate call going around, so of course Jordan rushed to delete his message talking to me about it. But Chrome didn't. If Jordan wasn't trying to hide something, he wouldn't have deleted any of that. This isn't the first time Jordan made a joke of my concerns either. Another time involved me flatly telling Jordan that he didn't need to be dating at the current time. He had no clue who he was at his core, and the other attempts had only ended in disaster. I didn't want him to deal with more heartbreak because I saw what it did to him. Jordan, knowing this, decided to date Neko Koda as a joke, once again making light of my concern for him. When Neko Koda decided to delete everything and run in December of 2022, Jordan came crying into my room to wake me up in the middle of the night, absolutely distraught with the possibility of Koda ending themselves. I woke up, comforted Jordan as best I could, and told him to try and get some rest. Because, unfortunately, if Koda had hurt themselves, it would have been too late to help them. This specific memory is a sticking point, and I'll tell you why. Remember when Peaches downed pills and no one told me? Jordan was confronted by Peaches about why that level of concern was shown for Koda, but not him. Jordan's response was, "I care more about my friends than my family." It's very sobering to look back on. All I was to Jordan was a ticket to a life where he didn't have to do anything. Jordan's lack of care for anything other than themselves stood out in two specific incidents, though, and trigger warning for pet death. In 2022, Jordan was charged with the care of a pair of cats in his room. He wasn't financially responsible for them, mind you, but he had to keep them fed, clean the litter box, and let us know the issues if they had them. The two cats were Mean Mug and Sherbert. One day, Jordan texted me letting me know Sherbert was extremely lethargic. He had deteriorated to the point that we couldn't save him, and we had to put him down. I care a great deal about animals. I always have. But for all of Jordan's talk about my verbal abuse, this is how I responded to his carelessness costing one of my pets his life. I was kind, patient. The people I've told this story to and shown these texts were absolutely enraged. They made it clear that they would not have shown them this grace. They even flatly said that Jordan would have been out that day. But instead, I let Jordan stay. The wife and I just kept a closer eye on the cats Jordan was caring for, because it was obvious he never actually paid attention to them. Sherbert was a good boy. He didn't deserve that. He'd still be here if Jordan cared about anything other than himself. Jordan in his own video mentioned a time where I got him into a call. I'm going to tell you all the truth behind that and what led to it. I was at work one day and someone told me Jordan was having a tough time with depression. So, I called him to check in on him. He said he was sad, but that he'd be okay. I trusted him at his word and let him go. 15 minutes later, he called to let me know the wife isn't very good at hiding her guns. Being over an hour away from someone you care about when they have a firearm and are threatening that is one of the worst feelings you can ever have. Thankfully, he was safe, and the wife and I got a fingerprint gun lock the next day. The firearms are there to protect the people I care about, not to be used as a tool to harm them. That's why we didn't have a lockbox to begin with. Some people may bring up the lack of a lockbox beforehand as some form of irresponsibility, but that's primarily if you have literal children with you. We never thought that Jordan would go literally rummaging through our stuff to try to find a weapon. It didn't make any sense to even think that. Later that year, Jordan was showing the same signs as that specific day, and I was worried. I got him in call with the rest of the family, trying to get him to talk to us, and to walk him through things that may help. Like going outside, being active, basic stuff he never wanted to do. I had to let him go, though, and told him to wait on the porch for my wife to get home, since I figured she'd beat me home. The weather was nice, and I needed to get Jordan out of the house in case his ideation kicked in. While the guns were locked away, there's still plenty of ways he could harm himself. However, I got home before my wife to discover Jordan had just decided to stay in his room instead, the room he downed those pills in. I told him flatly to go to the porch and wait since the wife would be home soon and we'd both talk to him. And we did. After it, my wife did reach out to give Jordan a comforting touch, and he shrunk away from it. I told Jordan that my wife and I would never hurt him, but we respected his boundaries. The last straw, though, the thing that took the cake, was how Jordan treated my wife when her father was dying from cancer. These words here are her direct story. In the latter part of 2023, the family chat on Discord still contained everyone who had been a part of the family. After Thomas and I had a discussion with everyone, Dan, Jay, Jordan, and Peaches, Jordan left the group in such a way as to be invisible in their actions. Thomas and I both noticed Jordan's exit the same day it happened. Now, for clarification, I was trying to cope with my dad's cancer diagnosis. I figured if it was important, Jordan would let us know what was going on, as an adult would or should. I also noticed during this time that Jordan was no longer helping with chores around the house, as was part of the agreement we made when he came to live with us. He would leave the kitchen a greasy mess after cooking dinner, wouldn't clean his room or bathroom. He was just barely taking care of the cats that shared his space, which was also part of the agreement. So I confronted Jordan in a non-aggressive manner to ask 1, why are you not assisting with chores around the house, and 2, why did you quietly leave the Discord group? I got no response to the first question, just typical behavior of looking down at the floor and shrugging his shoulders. When I asked the second question, I also provided to him that Thomas and I noticed immediately, and I was asked, why did it take so long for either of you to say anything? I told Jordan the reason why was because we have a lot of other things going on personally to deal with on top of an adult who couldn't communicate. At this point, I informed Jordan about the state of my father's health. He passed away within days of this conversation. I was grieving my father, and Jordan was unhealthily asking for attention by acting out like a child. I asked Jordan for a reason as to his behavior, if he could give me an explanation. I told him that I would like a response, waited a few seconds in silence, asked again, and added, I am asking, but you can choose to not show me the courtesy or respect. Waited a few more seconds and replied, okay, I have my answer. I won't ask again. I walked downstairs. A couple minutes later, I walked from the kitchen back towards the living room, and Jordan was still standing sullenly in the hallway. Then he opened his room door and shut himself back in. A few weeks later, we confronted Jordan about a lot of things when he came home from work. He could not apologize for any of his behavior, like he didn't know how to apologize. His words, I would say I apologize, but I don't think you'd believe me. With all of his treatment of us, I told him, I don't think I could believe you at this point. You never honestly apologized to us or expressed remorse for your actions. And that ends her statement. I tolerated a lot of Jordan's abusive behavior, from the death of a pet to them turning their ideation to a joke to the blatant disrespect in my home. But the way he treated my wife during all of that was the final straw. We were done. When it comes to how Jordan is acting now, that's not unusual either. When Vita got outed, before we found out Jordan was one of his victims concretely, Jordan went on a similar destructive rampage, like doxing someone FNGR was dating at the time that had no connection to any of that.
Okay.
I'm fucking tired of listening to you guys joke and round. You
Okay.
got mad at Anthony, you doxed me. It doesn't hurt him, it hurts me, someone who has had your back this entire fucking time.
Or by scouring my wife's Facebook to try to find something to weaponize against her. And make no mistake, Jordan is angry right now.
I think the live stream was the most mean and angry I had gotten about this whole thing. And I think you're right about how I need to be smarter. I don't like how I was in that live stream. It was purely emotional. I was literally shaking with rage. I was so mad.
Once this video is out, he'll likely do other destructive things for the same reason. So I'm going to be clear here. Jordan, if you attempt to do any further libelous or destructive actions in order to damage my reputation or employment, I will not meet you with a conversation. I will meet you with legal repercussions. Think very carefully before you go on another destructive bender. If Jordan wants to drop all of this and go about his life, I'm fine with that. He needs to get offline, get a job, and live in reality. But I'm not obligated to sit here and take further abuse from him. While the claims of abuse from my family fail to find any footing that isn't feeble, that's not to say I don't have faults and bad behaviors to address. This third and final call with Rosa was the result of Blue Davu and Rosa wanting to have some sort of discussion. I can't personally recall all the details surrounding it though. Up to this point, what we did know of Rosa was that she was constantly harassing and trying to deplatform Misanthropony, and that she knowingly allowed a child predator to stay in a server that still had children in it. In fact, my very first call with her on Techno stream was initially about her harassment of Misanthropony. She was lying to Techno about Misanthropony's actions in order to get Techno to cover him on his internet horror series, where people like Lily Orchard were covered.
So anyway, Rosa, let's get down into the nit and gritty. Let's talk turkey here. So you recently recommended that I add in Mr. Enter, the Fandom Menace, and the and Misanthropony into it. And recently I did do a poll on who I should add, which two. And looking back on it, let's just put it this way. I think the Fandom Menace is its own video where I might talk about why I don't like him, but it would be just that. Mr. Enter, I've done a video on him, but it was a review. The reviewer, I do plan on making a video on him, just like what I think he needs to improve on, the many failures, as I call it, because I think he can improve. I think he has a lot of issues. And then we have the situation with Misanthropony. I hate to say this to you, but I think what you're saying about him might be a little bit of a misrepresentation.
It's in this call that we discovered that she was a moderator in Star Giant's server and allowed a child predator to roam free there knowingly, because they were more concerned about a user named Lovely Lena possibly lying about Star Giant and her.
Let's just say I need to give my side of the story.
Oh, let's hear it. I'm all ears.
I didn't know about... Me and my friend Rebecca didn't know about what Nekopan was doing behind our backs because we had to deal with someone else who was lying. This person was known as Lovely Lena.
The second call was the result of Rosa demanding another conversation with me specifically. A bit after that is where the final call with Rosa happened, the one I mentioned at the beginning of this section concerning Blue. What did we do wrong in this call? Well, we let whoever wanted to have a shot at Rosa speak, but that's the most minor of things. Peaches and I actively said awful things to and about Rosa. It consisted of ableism, slut-shaming terms, among other things. While Peaches may have been the one to start it, that doesn't excuse what I myself allowed and said. For that, I am sorry. Genuinely. Ponder was right to call it out then, and it's fine to have it called out now. That's why, despite not liking the motivations of some of the people making videos on it, this video won't have any clapbacks towards them. I'll take my lumps when needed, and accountability is important, so I'll accept it. I went into that call knowing that Rosa was on the spectrum. While I should have communicated that to the call as a whole, I can attest that I wasn't as informed about how being on the spectrum can affect things like someone's ability to take in information and empathize. Working ableist words out of my vocabulary has been a struggle, but I put a lot of work into it. I'm not going to lie to people and say I'll never slip up again. But I am trying. There's a very specific word used in that call that's something my generation always used, but I never should have. In listening to this specific call, I had someone tell me how interesting they find it that I don't cuss, but I was fine with saying slurs. Truth is, I never should have been. I'll admit that I'm not perfect, but I've also been clear that I'm a practicing Christian. Not only should those words have never been in my lexicon due to how we're supposed to communicate, but it never should have been also due to the fact that every slur's purpose is to dehumanize and wrongly devalue people. As a Christian, I believe man is made in the image of God, made with an innate value and dignity. No matter the person or the wrongs they committed, slurs and ableism shouldn't be crossing my lips intentionally, at all. For that, I not only apologize, but I repent. I've actually worked this past year to correct that behavior and language. It's why my uploaded calls have gone from needing offensive words censored to not needing that at all. It's not just some show I put on for people. It's active change. Specifically because of how awful the Rosa call was, we completely restructured how the server and those calls happen. This includes only allowing proper moderation and the affected party's speaking abilities. The Peanut Gallery is not allowed to speak to the person or tag them in the side chat. They also aren't allowed to use ableist language or attack someone based on things they cannot control. The moderation staff has almost completely changed since then as well. Moderation staff that, absolutely, can tell me when they think I've gone too far. However, I do feel the need to correct some misinformation that's being spread about all this. It's been said Rosa wasn't a mod. They were. Here's evidence of that from the DMs Rosa shared with Asuka. Some people have claimed Rosa likely wasn't able to ban people due to how permissions can be set in Discord, which would be a good argument if the server owner were anyone other than Star Giant. While it is a possibility, I think it's extremely unlikely. We also have Rosa and Star Giant actively talking about Necopon. They knew what was going on. It's also been said that I spoke horrible things to Rosa, knowing they were a victim of sexual assault. This is not true. I found out about that in a call with Asuka after the final call with Rosa, wherein I asked Asuka to pass my apologies on to Rosa. Rosa saying they weren't offered an apology is likely misremembering or, in worst case, a lie. And let me rip that band-aid off now. Yes, Rosa is a liar. Although they are on the spectrum and have seizures, I feel the attitude other people have towards Rosa has flipped all the way to ableism in the other direction, by treating Rosa like she has no agency because she has a handler. This movement of overcorrection is something I've done as well, so I get it. It's something to work on. While the call I had with Rosa was vile and abhorrent, people forget how I ran into her to begin with. My initial confrontation with her on Techno's channel was due to her stalking, harassing, and scheming to get someone else to do a video on Misanthropony. Not because of the actual wrongs the man has done, but because she didn't like his takes on Star Wars. That absolutely shows Rosa is capable of actively lying and plotting against people. Specifically, as mentioned earlier, she tried lying to Techno by exaggerating Misanthro's actions at the time to get him featured on Techno's internet horror segment. This is cognition. Furthermore, people also forget the entire reason we got mad at Rosa was due to her allowing a known child predator to be in the server for 8 months. This specifically hurt Endo, a victim of said predator Necopon. And months after this call, Endo asked Rosa for an apology on Twitter. Rosa's response was to say she was possessed by a demon and that she couldn't give an apology or she'd have to harm her own family. A family member of hers was contacted, as going to the police about this would have been overkill. While said family member initially tried to defend the behavior due to her autism, they said Rosa was safe at home and they'd handle it. At no point was it said Rosa was bedridden. Yet another claim Rosa has made about the situation. While, again, the call was horrific and wrong, acting like Rosa is too unwell to make intentional active decisions is also wrong. It's flatly ableist. Full stop. Especially considering that this is an established pattern with Rosa. They'll obsess and try to direct harassment to deplatform people they don't like. Remember Lovely Lena that she mentioned in that stream? That's what she tried to do to her in 2021. Lovely Lena is also on the spectrum to the extreme that they're not even allowed on Discord anymore due to their activity on there. Here we see Rosa commenting on and quote tweeting Lena's mother on Twitter, berating her for the alleged wrongs that her daughter has done. I don't even know how she found any of this information out, but she's using a screen cap of Lena admitting to lying about a plethora of things. While Rosa claims sexual harassment among them, I haven't seen any evidence of this. Now, it could very well be true, and I recommend anybody look into it if they feel they need to, but all this really does is further highlight that Rosa knows when things are wrong and knows, at least in some fundamental level, to call things out. This also goes into her promoting videos about Lena, as well as talking about demons. Again, Rosa knew who Nekopon was and what she did. She's cognitive enough to try and run at least 2 people offline, both on the spectrum for smaller offenses. She's not helpless or incapable of making decisions. We may have treated her horribly, and make no mistake, we did. But Rosa is an obsessive stalker. We found out later on that while Nekopon was also in moderation in that server, it doesn't change the fact that Rosa has absolutely reacted negatively to terrible things about people before, to the point of obsession. Rosa knew what she was doing. When it comes to Rosa, I don't want to overcorrect again in either direction, but I have to acknowledge that Rosa has done things that were, and are, absolutely a concern to me. And I want to address the behavior appropriately without distracting from my own mishaps. The thing is, I'm still trying to feel out how to go about stuff like that when it comes to people with those disabilities and struggles. So I'm reaching out to you guys, the audience, for your feedback and experience. I'd be happy to hear you all out. I've had people ask me why we didn't get Star Giant in call instead of Rosa. An excellent question. Here's the answer. We tried to. Multiple times. Star refused to budge. It took Indo coaxing them into a private call where I wasn't allowed to get aggressive to her to get Star to talk to us at all. And the moment I pointed out an inconsistency, Star dipped. Hard. This isn't up to you. You wronged somebody else, but you're trying to set terms on when something's over? When you're sitting here going in circles? You really think that's how that works?
No, it doesn't. Go on.
Yeah. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to make time sometime tomorrow. And you're going to talk to them properly about all this, because they got a lot of other stuff they need to ask you, including chat logs where you are talking to Rosa about Nekopon.
I don't remember these.
Well, it's a good thing they have these chat logs then, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're going to remind you. We're going to refresh your memory.
Did she leave?
Oh my god.
That's why I was so calm in that call, alongside trying not to repeat the behavior with Rosa. This call, unfortunately, was leaked against Indo's will to dishonest actors by Techno, because Indo can't catch a break. Now I feel it's important to segue into the call I started with Raven Pines. While Susie will go into greater detail about this in her video, I have to talk about it a bit as Peaches decided to lie about what happened in that call to paint the idea that I haven't changed since the Rosa call. That's a complete fabrication, and anyone who has heard both calls would see the obvious difference. For starters, I didn't come into that call aggressive or angry at all. I wanted Raven to be honest, and I earlier caught her in a couple of lies. While I won't deny that my rounds of questioning became too invasive, I didn't go in there to be an ableist jerk. I was trying to figure out where she was at mentally so I wouldn't repeat the same behavior with Rosa. It can be difficult to hold people on the spectrum accountable if you're not aware of their placement on it. I don't want to be too hard on them if they can't help it, or too soft on them if they could. I'm going to make mistakes, which is why I'm fine in general with being corrected, but the way this was done wasn't the way it should have been handled. Raven put children in the path of dangerous people multiple times, knowingly. If anyone handled that call worse, it would have been Peaches, who spoke on behalf of people she didn't know, on a situation he had no knowledge of. Some of Peaches' statements from those leaked calls will be covered in the later portion. Those aren't my only mistakes, though. There's also a call from 2 years ago concerning someone named Dreadful Jax, a call I came into because Jax was sexually harassing someone else his age. The call was needless chest thumping and general stupidity on my end. In my attempts to intimidate Jax into stopping his nonsense, I crossed the line. I focused too much on his threats involving firearms and his stated gang affiliation. In my attempt to get the kid to stop his actions via intimidation, I didn't give a thought to the idea that he was chest thumping to compensate. While I made comments about life ruination, I absolutely didn't follow through with that. I called his school because his parents are deaf. I shared with them the call and told them explicitly multiple times that he didn't make threats to the school, just that his comments about owning firearms and being in gangs at that age was very concerning. I absolutely made the wrong decision in how I came into that call and the things I said and have done concerning it. This is something even Jax is aware of, as we've had a few conversations about it as well as past him apologies. Jax, in the second call you and I had, I did apologize to you for how I handled that call.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
When?
But no, remember, you came in and you talked to me and Pool Guy, the United States Marine that you kept getting upset because he was a brony, and I did apologize to you for how I handled that. That was out of pocket for me. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that, regardless of how out of sorts you were.
I don't remember.
You probably don't.
Yeah.
Why haven't I addressed this more publicly before, though? Well, that's because Jax has a really bad habit of doing unhinged or dangerous things when attention is put on him. That varies from interviewing pedo zoos, or even doing stunts like making direct calls to leave me gross voicemails.
Hi, Lio. The name's Tyrone, and I just fucked your wife. You can't do jack shit about it, can you? Yeah, Lio. You better check your wife's booty cheeks, because I clapped them. Hi, Tommy. Hi, Tommy. So, I was just curious. Can you buy me Helldivers 2? I mean, like, I'm willing to suck some dick for Helldivers 2. Pretty please? Hey, please, can you give me Helldivers 2, Tommy? Tommy! 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 Oh my god, I'm out of us tonight! Oh!
Now, some people may think this behavior is justified, but here's what people don't know. I've actively helped Jax in multiple situations where he's gotten himself into trouble by surrounding himself with scumbags that hate me. I've also had to tell him not to ask people to do morally repugnant things, like when he asked me to find a location of a girl he had an interest in. When I blocked Jax months ago, I laid all that out before doing so. Jax is a troubled teen by his own admission with severe anger issues.
You've got to
Don't
learn.
let these people get to your skin.
Why are you so angry? Like, just in general, where does all this
I
anger
have
come
really,
from?
I have really bad anger issues. This is disgusting.
Really bad
Why do you
what?
think I get into so much fights?
I couldn't understand what you were saying. You have really bad what?
Anger issues.
Yeah, but it's got to come from somewhere, son. Where is it?
I've done everything I could to help Jax despite his actions, including his aiding of sexual harassment to Queen Seraphina. I will not be speaking of him after this video. And Jax, any further attempts by you and your friends to harass or trouble me will be met with legal action, especially considering the deranged voicemails you've been leaving me. You said you wanted to join the army. Don't blow up because you still think your online actions don't affect your real life. To correct the record though, no, I didn't tell his school that he was a school shooter. Here's the DMs that I had with Sarah during my contacting of the school, where I'm frustrated that I had to keep telling them that it's not what I was claiming. For those of you who think this put a black mark in his record, that's also not true. That's from Jax himself in his DMs with Sarah, stating he didn't even get into trouble. So there's that. Then we have the call with Jibs that Peach is clipped and put into the ether as evidence of my alleged abuse. It was a day after I dealt with the coyote situation. I let my temper and stress get to me. I shouldn't have said what I did to Jibs. At all. My general way of treating Jibs as a whole was wrong, and I'll make no excuses for it. I apologized to Jibs after that call, multiple times. Jibs has stated to me that what they want to see us change, and I'm hoping to not let them down. The reason I'm not going into detail about all this is because that's Jibs' story to tell if they want. I will not deprive them of it, nor will I attempt to sway you. Next up is Crystal Flame. I'm sure people have noticed that video is gone now. I deleted it, because that video's information wasn't accurate. It did damage to a person I should have shown more kindness to. While I think her threat and some comments and actions were out of line, something she agrees with and even mentioned in her video response, so go check that out. I don't believe she's the malicious person I was convinced she was. I'll go more into why that video shook out the way it did in a further section, but this is a direct apology, public, to Crystal, Dorito, and the other people that video hurt. I'm also sorry to the people I treated poorly or like enemies. I will, again, be explaining my actions more in depth a bit later. But apologies are still needed as the actions were still mine. The apology belongs to people like Harley, who should have been given more grace in general instead of being pushed into assuming the worst. Alongside that is Mally Malware, who I tried to get to cut off people like Harley, Thuman, and Cringy. It also goes to people like Manga Common, Asuka, Nikki, and a few others I'm probably forgetting because of the sheer amount of damage I've done. Explanations will come, I promise, but I'm genuinely sorry for those actions. One apology that seemingly comes out of nowhere, though, is an apology to Akumu. In a previous video, I called him the king of false allegations. This is because Peaches was scared of being falsely listed as a predator in his FCK video. Well, that's due to Kumo, in a call he didn't know was recorded, stating it was his intent to do so.
And it would just come back to me regurgitating this point and reminding you that Peaches tried to cover up the fact that she was in a love triangle between Toasty Vanilla, who was like in his mid-20s, and the Teddy that draws, who was like 15 or like turning 16 at the time, when Peaches herself was 19 turning 20 back in like 2019, 2020. It's all in plain
You say
sight.
this a reminder, but I actually didn't really know much
I did
about
tell you
this.
about this. I did tell
I
you
feel
about
like
this,
it would.
and
I
me
feel
and
like it's
Akuma
been
were going to cover
mentioned,
this.
but I don't know a lot of context behind this.
Me and Akuma are actually. Me and Akuma, we've been. I thought he would have told you, but I thought I've been kind of like forward about it whenever I've discussed it. Is that this is the kind of shit that Peaches. This is the shit that Peaches wants covered up and doesn't want acknowledged.
So for that, Akubu, I do also publicly apologize. Before I begin here, I have to state that I've learned Peaches will absolutely spread private info as tea gossip, something he accused Crystal of doing. Peaches has actual docs information on me, something that, if he spreads, could cause a lot of problems in my life. This isn't in relation to anything illegal, mind you, just personal stuff. And if he does, I have multiple people in his country that would report him to his authorities for it, as that is illegal. This includes if he passes it to other people for that exact reason. And to his partner in crime, the calls where I've mentioned the stuff has only happened in hidden, non-public channels. So let's not try to play pretend at loopholes. I also hate to admit it, but I'm worried about Peaches due to this video. Despite what you're all going to learn, I know he's not in the best place mentally, and I don't want him to harm himself or worse. But I'm in a position where if I don't speak publicly about this, it won't properly explain how I've been acting, and may cause Peaches to harm other people. And I can't let that happen. So I have to do this. I met Hopeless Peaches during his drama. I planned on helping him during it, but my job was extremely time-consuming at the time and my health nosedived. By the time I was able to stick my head up, most of the event had passed. While I still regret not getting involved in that situation, I tried my best to support him in any way I could afterwards, whether that meant having a safe place to vent, or to talk about the events in his life, past or present. However, we really started to connect in April of 2022, after Peaches alerted me to someone continuing to stalk and obsess over them. That's what led to the live stream about Rabbit and his friends that's since been unlisted due to Rabbit and I having a conversation about all of it almost 2 years ago at this point. From there, Peaches and I got closer emotionally. They were unwell and needed someone there for them. More punctuated by an attempt on his life he had when I was online with him. I convinced him to call an ambulance and eventually go to the hospital himself. I stayed in call with him until around midnight my time, knowing I'd need to be up at 3 a.m. like usual. This is because I cared and knew he was scared. Not just because of the attempt, but also because of the fact that he was scared of hospitals. Shortly after that, Peaches said all he had in terms of male authority figures were bad ones, so I offered to bring him into my family unit. I wanted to give Peaches what he needed, and this was a way to do it. But despite public appearances, things weren't always good. And not due to the reasons Peaches is saying. I already told you guys what happened concerning Peaches and the rest of the family in February of 2023. But what I haven't done is tell you in detail what happened afterwards. In March of 2023, Peaches started accusing me of outright abuse for the first 8 months he was in my family. He cited events I don't remember, and the ones I did, he didn't recount correctly. While I'm sure it's true that I didn't always talk to Peaches in the way he needed, I don't think I'd been abusive. However, any response to these accusations in my defense was met with claims that I think he's crazy, that I don't care about him, and sometimes in threats to his own health or safety if I kept questioning it. One of which included him telling me to admit to a lie he said I told, harming himself, and saying he'll do worse if I didn't do it. So I started to accept that I was, indeed, abusive. Not something he wanted to keep between us, as worked out, mind you. I had to tell people. My wife, the other family members, and other people. I had this in the back of my mind for over a year. The idea that I'm an abuser, and if I didn't do what Peaches wanted, or what he felt was right, I was being abusive again. Peaches regularly ignored my boundaries. If I tried to keep them up, he'd completely melt down on me. This was also extended to things he knew troubled me. I mentioned earlier the personal fear of winding up like my old man. But another one was the fact that one of the reasons we never had bio kids is because I'd be scared of losing my wife, the kid, or both. Peaches knew this. He knew it. So what anime did he demand I watch? Clanad. Now, this isn't a personal shot at that anime, it's genuinely great. I don't regret watching it as a whole, but I thought I remembered something like that happening in the show. I asked Peaches and he told me it didn't. Spoiler alert, it did. If he had at least been upfront about it, I wouldn't have minded it. But I couldn't bring it up either, because if I didn't regularly talk about how much I liked what he had us watching, he'd take it in the direction of me not liking spending time with him, or that I hate him. It was a vicious cycle. Peaches was also regularly demeaning and insulting to me in both private and public. While I always took the public stuff as playful ribbing, it's been made clear to me by people around me that it's not okay. Peaches attacked my appearance, regularly tried to emasculate me, undermine me, and if I was dealing with something that had nothing to do with him, it was downplayed. Like where he started making a stream of mine a mockery with no context because of a topic he didn't care about. Hello, you are live.
Hello.
Okay, so now, because you are here, let me go ahead and
stream it.
You want me to just stream it? Okay, I'll try.
Yeah, just show me the thingy-majiggy.
The thingy-majiggy-majig. We have Hopeless Peaches here with us because she must be extremely bored.
No, I'm not bored. I try to go to sleep, and then I try to go to sleep.
You try to go to sleep, and then you try to go to sleep.
So, hello everyone. I'm here because I see that he's like like streaming cringe. I see that he's like failing at life.
Always.
So, and the reason why I sound like this is because I'm on painkillers. Thank you. That is part of the reason why I couldn't quite sleep, because even with painkillers, I had massive shooting of pain up my entire life.
Well, the chat's
So,
happy to see you.
hopefully this will be... Of course, the chat's happy to see me, because you guys know that I'm cooler than whatever this dog does. So...
This is true.
Tell me what's going on. Don't give me like a big rundown, because I don't care, but like...
TLDR.
I heard cease and desist letter.
TLDR, some dumb idiot started a fight, and whenever he gets any sort of consequences, he makes himself out to be a victim.
Oh, okay, just like everyone else. Okay.
Yep. Trying to run a harassment campaign, and when he gets called on it, he acts like it's a surprise that people are mad at him. So, let's continue. Despite the fact that it had to do with libel and stalking and harassment. I'm about to invoke a name I think a lot of you are going to be surprised by. In 2021, Creepshow Art put out a video that was a condemnation of Hopeless Peaches and his behavior. Having opened up my private conversations with Peaches to people who know far more about manipulation and gaslighting and emotional abuse than I do, I've come to understand that Shannon had a point, despite her being a complete scumbag in her own right. Haven't forgotten that you own CSM there, Shannon. While the original video, much like Creepshow's channel, is long since gone, you can still find records of some of the accusations she made on Wikitubia and in the videos that were made at the time. Accusing Peaches of spreading lies about her behind the scenes, poisoning the well against her with other creators through saying she was psychotic, even accusing Creepshow of screaming at and attacking him in their conversations when, according to Shannon, she viewed Peaches akin to a younger sibling. If what Shannon said was true, that would mean Peaches was willing to form strong emotional bonds with people only to spread rumors trying to hurt them once their back was turned. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that I viewed Peaches like a member of my family. For as much as Shannon was caught lying, caught doctoring screenshots objectively, Shannon was just as bad as she tried to portray Peaches. I'm now starting to wonder if this is because most of what happened between her and Peaches happened in private calls, because that's what happened to me. I didn't record my calls with Peaches, and based on what we were finding through only my DMs with him and the conversations he had with others behind my back, I'm starting to regret that. Thankfully, in some regrets, I do have screenshots for how Peaches would play nice with other art commentary people in public, only to badmouth them in front of me to shape my opinions of them. And I'm sad to say that it worked. I'm still having to check some of my opinions on these creators because they were informed by the lies that Peaches would feed me. Things like accusing Thuman of having never apologized for her role in the Hopeless Peaches drama until she was pressured to do so. In fact, Thuman apologized multiple times, both in public and in private. Every time Peaches would accept these apologies to Thuman, but would lie about them having never happened when speaking about it to me. This level of cutoff included Peaches not wanting me to help Thuman with something she brought to me that affected other people. It wasn't until after Peaches tried to paint me as a predator and I finally came to Thuman to ask, and Peaches was right. She didn't give one apology. She gave 7, one of which was in my live stream. When I brought it to Peaches' attention, she told me not to engage so we didn't get beef with Thuman. In retrospect, I think it was honestly Peaches lying to me about all of this and making sure I had no way to find out. Peaches was trying to make Thuman look like a bad person in my eyes. He did this with multiple art commentators. Peaches called Kalimara deranged. He said that Mally was effed up in the head and implicit in his drama, even though Mally tried to come to his aid, which apparently wasn't good enough. I know that feeling. I told Peaches that I planned on talking to Mally about some of my own issues with her and that our issues overlapped in some cases. I figured Peaches and Mally would be friends again if Mally weren't around awful people directly due to what Peaches had expressed to multiple people publicly. So a call was had. I didn't find out until last month that it was Mally that cut Peaches off back in November of 2023. I absolutely was trying to get Mally to cut off people based on what Peaches had convinced me of. Mally isn't perfect, but didn't deserve to have that put in her lap. I saw how the two interacted and felt Mally was a good influence and the two of them gelled well. I was trying to make sure Peaches kept friends, but the way I was directed and went about it was completely in the wrong. After I got done with that call, Peaches hopped in call with me and berated me. Not only because my OBS died, but also because I had the call short of one other person that I initially planned on having in it. In this call, I was told how stupid I am, that I don't think anything through, and that Mally was obviously plotting against him with others. And now, I don't have evidence of it. So even when I did things for him to try to maintain his friendship with others, I got beaten down. This was a constant. So, Mally, now you know why Lumi asked you for your copy of that call. He tried to advise me against interacting with Ponder Sprocket. He called Harley TBS a snake and said they were just as bad as the people who invalidated their grooming. Peaches would tell me Harley was always treating him poorly, telling me that when he vented about things that Harley would claim he's proving Creepshow right. When we dealt with a couple of situations concerning the behavior of Harley's mods, Peaches always complained I was going too soft on Harley, despite Harley's age. From claiming Harley is no better than the people that deny they were groomed, all the way to saying I shouldn't help Harley at all. I always wanted to give Harley the benefit of the doubt, and to properly voice when I had an issue, but anytime I wanted to, Peaches would browbeat me about it, declaring I didn't care what Harley did to him. That is, unless Peaches wanted me to run defense for him. I've had a long-standing history of letting people know directly when I had an issue with them or their actions. Peaches boxed me in to force me to break that, or the consequences would be dire. He called Nezzy, though like Harley, not art commentary, the R-slur, and racist. Peaches held a grudge against a child who played into his drama and encouraged me to block them. This was Musicina. He invalidated the trauma of others, saying they could just block people harassing them, while he was openly and publicly talking about Kai and Omnia. Some of you may be wondering what happened to the call I had with Junkie and Manga Comment. I'm about to tell you. In October of 2023, Peaches was having another spiral. He flatly told me how much he hated that call, telling me that when he listened to it, all he could think was how much he wanted Manga and I to remove ourselves from the census. In this call, he demanded that we watch that video together, telling me that if I didn't defend him even once in that call from 4 years ago, that he wouldn't speak to me, ignoring the fact that I hadn't even spoken to Peaches when that call happened. So we watched it, and while I think I should have been harder to both Junkie and Manga, primarily Junkie, I was constantly berated during the watching, told I was part of a backroom deal to hurt him and get the heat away from Manga Comment. This meltdown went late into the night. I didn't get any sleep. It's why I started being very cold to Manga Comment. It's also why I privated the video. Peaches telling me that if I deleted it, it would be removing evidence. I'm being told by my note taker on manipulation in the script here that this is likely Peaches trying to keep this as ammunition so he could continue to use it against me at later dates. If I had deleted video, then he would lose access to it. Even if everything is a little scattered around, I do have a couple of full conversations that show the kind of stuff Peaches was doing. Like that time when we were trying to play Among Us in Senate, specifically because Peaches wanted to play and yet he wasn't having a good time. This is because he wasn't getting the imposter role. He was having computer troubles, and because when Peaches got the imposter role, he had a habit of going after me like a homing missile. So when I died in the game, people would assume it was Peaches and vote him out, despite them also regularly killing me. You know, part of the point of the game. Due to his computer problems, Peaches was ejected from the game, and while he was trying to rejoin, there was a misunderstanding about him coming back. And since we'd already played a couple of rounds, the players in Senate started leaving the call to do other things. Peaches proceeded to take out his frustrations on me. If I made a mistake or misunderstood what he wanted, he framed me as maliciously trying to hurt him. When I tried to offer solutions, he rejected them, and then started gaslighting me and accusing me of not wanting to help him, not caring, or not wanting him around. In our DMs, when Peaches says there's no point in playing, I misunderstood him as not intending to play the game anymore, so I left the game. When I realized my mistake, I offered to rejoin the game so that we could play a few more rounds. But because I'd left the call already by that point, Peaches accused me of gaslighting him, as if I couldn't just jump back into the call. He accused me of lying. After I realized he still wanted to play, I could stay in the call. But since I had misunderstood, and I'd already left the call, I only understood that he wanted to play after I'd left. But he accused me of lying because I was offering to jump back in. I've been told that constantly accusing someone of lying when they misunderstood your wants and are trying to correct that is a means of putting them on the defensive in a conversation. He acted like this was a big deal and a personal slight against him, because I mistakenly left a game of Among Us when I wasn't supposed to. Peaches was trying to make me feel like I was crazy for misreading a line, no point in playing for no reason, as him no longer wanting to play, and then made me feel guilty for misunderstanding what he wanted to do. Peaches then accuses me of saying he's a liar before immediately turning around and accusing me of lying with no, you just lie, screw off, when I'm trying to help fix the misunderstanding. I offered to get in call with him to help sort things out, but he refused, closing off any avenues to fix the situation in place of continuously making me feel guilty for a mistake. He would have rather had me stew in guilt instead of coming to an understanding that would have made him feel better. Because, remember, this is all stemmed from Peaches not having fun, and then my misunderstanding of his intentions being hurtful to him. He would have rather stayed mad at me if it meant I felt guilty for not acting the way he wanted me to in the moment. Peaches told me that he wanted to keep playing, but when I tried to set up another game for us to play, he refused. Was that not what he wanted? The fact that he then went on to continue to complain that the game had ended sorta indicated as much, but he still refused when I tried to cater to his wishes. He then blamed me for the game ending, when I wasn't even the person hosting the game, constantly flip-flopping between saying that he still wanted to play and that he doesn't want to play with me. This might also be worth noting that the person who went over these DMs and pointed out all the emotional manipulation that Peaches was implementing specified in their notes that they were already getting a headache by this point. That this is not only gaslighting, but also a means of emotionally burning out the other person in the conversation. Peaches goes on to say, "I don't want to play games with you or stupid Senate people. None of you care if I'm around," as if that's something I can fix or something that's my fault. He accuses me of not caring if he's around when I just told him that I don't want to play Among Us unless he's around. So he's just ignoring anything I say at this point while continuing to accuse me of things. He then goes to a malicious extreme, saying that the reason I left call, even though I've explained multiple times that I misunderstood his wants, was because I didn't want Peaches to have any friends, which is completely untrue, and puts the onus of Peaches making friends in Senate on me. That if Peaches is not making friends with people, then it's my fault. This, despite my attempts to help Peaches make friends with the other members of the art commentary community. That if people in Senate didn't want to be around or didn't want to play with Peaches, that's on me. Because this grown adult can't make friends on his own and then has to blame someone else for that instead of addressing his own behavior. He accused me of being mean to him. Again, because I left the game without realizing he wanted to keep playing. My note taker is getting very frustrated at this point. When he says, "I just wanted to play a game and you just ruined it for me," he's blaming the fact that he wasn't enjoying himself on me when he was clearly not having fun before I left. I'm not in control of the people who were voting him out. I was dead at the time. I don't control the game. I wasn't the code stopping him from getting the imposter role. My note taker speculates that Peaches was upset by the fact that nobody stuck around so that he could get his coveted imposter role, so that he had to make someone feel small so that he could feel better about himself. He was upset that people weren't seeking his approval in game and doing what he wanted, so he had to try to force someone to seek his approval. Because that's what he wanted from the people in that Senate call. He demanded I apologize to him for leaving the game. Peaches then projects his own behavior onto me by accusing me of pinning everything on him, as if he hadn't just been blaming him not being able to enjoy the game on me as well as the people in my server not being his friends. Peaches says that he doesn't want to be present in my server anymore because he couldn't win at a game of Among Us. Some of you might think I'm being too mean in pointing out that Peaches has the emotional regulation of a toddler, but Peaches admits that himself. All of this culminates in Peaches saying, "Nobody wants me around, I want to be dead." Despite my multiple attempts to fix the situation, despite me offering to jump back and do a game with him that I don't really consider myself a fan of, to start up a call, he goes to this kind of extreme. How do you think that made me feel? That despite all my efforts to reassure him and calm him, the simple fact that I made a mistake was enough to spur ideation. Peaches wants to blame me for threatening to institutionalize him, when he's expressing a want to harm himself and then going offline so that none of us can check if he's okay, but he's willing to threaten his life over a game of Among Us? It should be noted that most of the time Peaches was conducting this behavior in private, either in calls or behind my back to other people. I really had to go spelunking in my DMs and cross-reference information with other people in order to figure a lot of this out, especially since I'm not well-versed in psychology or psychological manipulation. So if other people hadn't pointed these things out to me, I wouldn't have been able to recognize the problem on my own. That was extra difficult for me because I am someone who struggles to open up about my problems. I'm the type of person that someone who wants to emotionally manipulate someone in private would gravitate towards because I would be less willing to speak about it to other people. And while this is one of those times where Peaches went after me verbally instead of in text, it's a big enough one that I feel like I have to address it here. The other time I want to talk about happened on my birthday. One thing you need to know about me is that I don't enjoy my birthday. Maybe that'll change in the future, but that's the way I am now. I don't like people wishing me a happy birthday, and I don't like celebrating it. Peaches knew this because I shared it with him. Yet on my birthday, he sent me a DM that sounded really serious, saying that I needed to jump into a call with him and Crystal Flame. When I did, Peaches started singing happy birthday to me, in the call, in front of someone else. I wasn't super happy about this. Apparently Crystal Flame had wanted to wish me a happy birthday. Instead of telling her that I wasn't fond of my birthday, Peaches decided it would be a better idea to ambush me in a call, to do something I'd told him I didn't appreciate, and still expect me to be grateful that he had because it was in front of someone else. Because that's what happened. Peaches got upset with me because I wasn't appreciative of what he'd done. Think about it this way. I had expressed a boundary to Peaches. That being that I didn't enjoy celebrating or acknowledging my birthday. Knowing about that boundary and how I felt about it, he orchestrated a situation where he could violate that boundary in front of another person who wasn't aware it existed. So if I were to get upset in front of that third party, I would look like an unreasonable, ungrateful jerk who was getting mad at someone for wishing me a happy birthday. Almost like he expected me to play nice and let him violate my boundaries if it was for the sake of not making him look bad in front of another person. Peaches was implicitly testing my boundaries here. He was trying to see if I would let him walk all over me and do something that I told him I didn't like. He wanted to see if I would keep my mouth shut and pretend like he was being nice, when he was knowingly being a jerk and trying to hurt me. He wanted to see if I would protect him, even in the face of violating the boundary I had set. And I did. Given that I wasn't super happy about it, Peaches later chewed me out in a call for making him look bad. According to our DMs, we were in that call for 2 hours before Peaches stopped engaging, and I left. An hour later, when I was out of the house and doing things on my birthday, Peaches sent me a DM saying he wasn't doing well, prompting me to come home faster. When I did manage to get home and get back in call with him, it turns out it was just so he could berate me even more. So Peaches wanted to look nice in front of Crystal Flame by singing happy birthday to me in a call, but then spent a good chunk of the rest of my birthday yelling at me and making me feel bad for not being happy about what he'd done. Peaches went out of his way to violate my boundaries and make my birthday uncomfortable so that he could make it all about him and how much of a victim he is because I didn't enjoy having my boundaries violated by someone who claimed they cared about me, putting me on the defensive and invalidating my feelings on a day that he already knew I didn't enjoy. He'd regularly attack me in ways he knew that would hurt. Here, he literally says he should have kept talking to his groomer instead of me. Another example comes to how Peaches treated me sometimes when I woke up. Peaches knows me waking up is the worst time to hit me with anything. This is because I have sleep apnea, and my sleep quality hasn't been the best the past 6 years as I get older. Peaches knew about this, but here he is immediately taking shots at me when I wake up. When I fell into a depressive slump later on, he made it a point to tell me how he was still mad at me. Before that, we have him coming at me sideways when I wake up because of Spoctor's brief return. Peaches talks about how I'm a horrible abuser, but said the exact opposite in DMs for the years I've known him, even calling me best dad ever. I did everything I could for Peaches. I was literally on call with Peaches for a couple hours after I woke up, all the way to when he fell asleep. I spoke to him multiple times about how he needs to adjust his sleep schedule for the both of us, but he flat out refused to. Even when he said he'd be fine with me going to bed before him, the times I tried always ended in disaster. Every disagreement, every time there was pushback, Peaches' health and life was on the line. It was evidence that I don't care, and that I wanted him dead. He used me as a lightning rod for the conflicts he got into, and as a weapon against anyone he didn't like. Which is why the Crystal video happened. I was initially working on a response to the allegations, but Peaches got upset I wasn't prioritizing the idea that Crystal wronged him, so that became the main focus. During all of this, Peaches was operating a personal server where he slung the most hateful things I've ever seen written about me, all while he knew I was working on a video to defend him. I was just a workhorse for him. Peaches intentionally had people put misinformation into my script, like the idea that Crystal's screw-up in the Glitchtail server was handled in private. It wasn't. Peaches blasted a victim of predation in public, knew that, and let a lie be spread intentionally. This is alongside the fact that Peaches didn't want me to show any kindness to Crystal. When Lumi and Peaches realized the video wasn't working in Peaches' favor, they started plotting all the stuff that went down last month. It's difficult to say this, especially considering my age and knowing people are going to make a joke out of this, but what Peaches has done to me is abuse. And make no mistake, abuse can happen to an older person by a younger one. Peaches abused me verbally, emotionally, and financially. A lot of people are wondering how Peaches survived for so long without a job. I'm the reason why, including the new iPad I got him so he could do his commissions. I spent over $8,000 to help Peaches survive. I'm not bringing this number out to shame Peaches for needing help in general, but he often put off his commissions or chose not to work on videos. When you're in need, it's time to buckle down and get that stuff done. But part of me feels that Peaches didn't because he knew I'd bail him out if he needed me to. Why wouldn't I? We were family and I cared about him. I'm so abusive that I couldn't be treated like a person, but my money's spent just the same, I guess. But let's talk about Peaches' personal server and what he did leading up to what Lumi pulled in Senate. When the FCK stuff became public, Peaches dipped from the public. In this server, though, he started making it a point to isolate me, by bringing in mods of mine that he knew had troubling history with older men. Here, he convinced them that I was an abuser. Never with evidence, mind you, just by using the same methods he used on me. Here he said vile things about me. So did the people around him. People like Lumi, Space Bear Billy, K Cosmic, Sin, Hidden Heroine, Sadie Illustrator, and the only person who didn't say anything horrendous about me was Untitled Sunny, though they still participated in the server. Lumi's part was to further isolate me, to tell me not to talk about my personal issues with my mod staff. He also made it a point to go to Harley and directly lie about me, what happened in calls, and other things. Harley has been given screenshots pointing all this out as well. What they take away from this, though, is up to them. Lumi is the one who banned me from someone's server after a Crystal video, despite Lumi being one of the people that helped with the Crystal video. Lumi's their own batch of deranged, snakish creature, but he's been shown to be a pathological liar. Peaches also got people to lie to me in calls. He wanted to make sure I was completely isolated, that no one would be there to help when Lumi and him chose to make a spectacle out of alleged abuse. Peaches chose to lie about Jibs giving them permission to use that call. They didn't. And even later, when Lumi was confronted by Jibs about all that, the doc has yet to be corrected. Lumi instead is choosing to lie and tell people he no longer has contact with Peaches. There's no way that's true, Lumi, and no one is buying it. Peaches has been running from Jibs and accountability for all of this ever since their doc. Lumi specifically treats it like it's silly behind the scenes. This is because if it's not about Peaches' drama, then it's not important. But let's give some examples for that. Asuka has confided to me that Peaches disregarded what she's been through, but that's just hearsay, although I fully believe it. More to the point, though, it's how Peaches treated Heaton. Heaton has trauma about backroom biting? Well, that doesn't matter.
I think that creating group chats when we think there's an issue instead of confronting it directly is going to cause more suspicion and division among mod staff than it is if we don't just go to people with our problems about them. Especially when that's what Senate is supposed to be about.
As instead of just talking around the issue, especially considering that was literally asked a bajillion times in the actual conversation, because I literally said I was in distress about it and I wanted to talk to people. And then if people thought that I actually had a valid reason to go and talk, then I would go and ask to do it. And I was asked constantly, like, about me being backbiting and backstabbing and go behind people's backs. Like, you can't also sit there and go, oh, I understand why you're doing that, but then also talk around the issue as if I'm not even here. And then not only that, but then start asking questions directly in relation to what I was upset about, and then going, oh, I knew that never would have happened ever. I just wanted to hear it, as if, like, you just wanted to make a point.
I didn't want to make a point. It's best not to... We've talked about this repeatedly, that we don't want to make assumptions. I want to go to him directly. I want to hear him tell me that for sure. I don't want to make an assumption. I want to believe the best. But if we are asked about it, if it is brought to us, if something happens, and we don't have a response, and we've said that we've never talked to him about it, we've only presumed it, that's not the right way to go about it. My response to that is, then how am I supposed to know at any given minute that there's not a group chat about me right now?
Well, there are public accusations against you?
No.
Then there you go.
There weren't public accusations against me the last time there was a group chat without me.
Yeah, but you're literally, like, pushing things, and I get that you've got past experience with it, but you also can't say, well, I've got past experience with X, so therefore I'm going to shut down your feelings and past experience on literally what you're talking about right now. Especially when you're framing it as, like, me doing backstabby shit to someone I talk to every single day.
I literally just said I wasn't talking about you.
What Heaton's trying to say is, my point was a group chat like that existing when there's accusations, I understand. And Heaton saying, I disagree that group chats like that should happen when there's accusations. To my understanding, and either of you can correct me if I'm wrong here, please do, but the group chat you guys had was fine for what it was for.
Yeah, I have no problem with the group chat for what it was for.
Yeah, I'm just saying my problem, because I had to leave the chat and I didn't bother talking to the mods after, and I know not to talk to you after this point, because the entire time I was in there, I was just being questioned the entire time.
Despite Peaches actively doing the very thing that triggers Heaton, first to Dolce, and then to me. Heaton has constantly been accused by Peaches of being terrible to them, claiming Heaton intentionally triggered him by asking questions concerning the other family members' accusations against me. Everything had to revolve around Peaches. When Cartoon She was in danger and I was trying to find people to help him, Peaches made it about the fact that he didn't have any connections to help because people didn't like him. I was struggling with the other former family members being awful. It had to be about what they did to Peaches. I have a live stream that he hops in on at the last moment. He gets mad that I had Heaton on and I didn't extend it for him. Peaches also made it a point, before even this, to poison other people against my wife and I. Peaches just wants places where he can say awful things unchallenged. Peaches isolated me. used me, and behind the scenes directed me to attack others for perceived wrongdoings without providing evidence. I couldn't even reach out to those people to get their side of things without being told I was in the wrong for not believing him. For example, I brought up earlier that Peaches was on call to me when I spoke to Jordan and Jay. The reason for this was because he'd regularly berate me in calls, saying I was lying about speaking to the two of them for the wrongs they've done. Peaches didn't believe me because he wasn't around for those conversations, knowing full well that they happened in person, so I let him listen in on the final ones I had to appease his paranoia, only to be berated after those discussions about how I didn't speak the way he wanted me to. When Peaches dropped all of this to harm me, I had a complete breakdown in a server I was safe to do so in. After sharing some DMs, I was informed that what Peaches put me through was abuse. I didn't want to accept it at first. After all, I'm an older, tougher guy. How could I be abused? But the more people poured through our DMs, the Senate logs, and calls, it got to the point that I couldn't really deny it and be within reality. Peaches abused me, abused all the kindness and stability I offered. And when I could no longer be used, I was tossed aside. I feel that Peach has been abused by so many older men that it made him feel better to tear down one that wouldn't fight back. After all, what else are you going to do when the men who actually wronged you could no longer be reached? You go for the one you can reach. This leads to some of the text he had on screen with the calls he edited down and put out. I can't address all of the claims, and many of them don't even make sense as is, so I'll just cover some of them. In this one, he claims I wanted mods to help bully a victim, and that the Raven call is evidence that I don't care for it when mods push back. While, again, I will not justify that call with jibs. The reason I shouted at the other mods is because in a lot of situations at that point, I felt I was left alone to deal with every unpleasant incident in the server or out of it. That's where the barking came from, not a desire to harm someone else. We'll address more of the claims about the Raven call further down. In this one, Peaches is claiming that Missy was modded as a minor and that I'd normalize bad stuff to them and have them draw sexual art to my taste. This is more of Peaches trying desperately to frame me as a predatory person. Missy was only made a proper mod after turning 18, and they have never done sexual art at all. But don't just take my word for it. Here's Missy themselves talking about it.
So, during a whole call, Aaron said I was 18. That's false, because from what I remember, I was actually 19. And Lio did not push me to do any sexual art whatsoever, considering I don't draw anything of the sort, since sexual art makes me uncomfortable. But yes, I draw heftier women, but that's a me thing. That's my preference, because I myself am a bigger woman, and I'm comfortable doing that. The running joke is that people would need a spoon because of how thick I draw bodies sometimes. That's it. No one pushed me to do anything, and the fact that Aaron is pushing the notion that Lio is a potential predator is very disgusting.
Remember how I said Peaches made me tell my wife I was abusive? Here's him pointing to that, and claiming how I'd have to use all my energy to not be abusive to him. This is also false, and you can see that not only in every interaction on my channel where I did nothing but let him have his way, but everyone in Senate can tell you the same. Peaches wants desperately to paint me as some abuser that's on the brink of snapping. This one has Peaches saying he hated himself for the Rosa call. He hated more the fact that it was public because it brought people to comment towards him about it. It's why instead of taking proper accountability, he tacked it onto the beginning of a doc that was mainly focused on painting himself as a victim. You can criticize me for putting it in a video generally unrelated to the situation, and that may be fair, but I didn't cut and run the minute it started getting picked up. I'm still here, and still being held accountable. Further on, Peaches claimed that all I cared about was my ego. This is also not true. Were that the case, I wouldn't have let him publicly mock me constantly, or consistently undermine me everywhere I went. If it were any other mod, there would have been other ways Peaches would have tried to get their attention. Even if I was active in the side chat earlier, that doesn't mean I always will be. All it would have taken is for someone to DM me, and Lumi to just ask me to check my DMs to bring all that to an end in a proper manner. Instead, Peaches chose the option to best try to assert themselves over me. This has been going on for a while, and why I had a breakdown about it in the mod chat. A chat I didn't know was recorded, showing me at my limits and unable to tell people why I was pushed to that point by Peaches. After all, who would believe me anyways? Peaches demonstrated this by talking about how no one was on my side. He falsely frames it as being about the Rosa call, but was actually to demonstrate his own isolation methods. Speaking of that, he claims that me telling Sunny to not act as a moderator between us was proof of me trying to isolate him from other people. This is also untrue. Peaches had multiple meltdowns anytime someone we both know would defend me or speak highly of me. The reason I told Sunny not to act as a mediator is because Peaches would regularly scream at me about how he didn't have friends, and I knew putting Sunny in a position where he may have to take my side, even as a possibility, wouldn't end well. Moving on, we have Peaches framing me saying, "I love you" as inherently familial affection. I'm sorry, but what? I said I love you to Peaches as well before being family, because I say that regularly to my friends. Is it really that uncommon? Sure would explain a lot. Next up, we have Peaches claiming that I'd twist private things to be perceived as different publicly. citing that I told a CC member that they'd say you'd call him a predator. The only thing I can think of when it came to this is maybe Harley, but that's a claim Peaches was making and actively pushed to me. On top of that, I actively told Harley that Peaches was having a breakdown and not doing okay. This is just a manipulative lie that Peaches is telling. Later, we have Peaches saying his disagreements with me were subdued, that I'd personalize abuse towards him in private for any pushback. This is absolutely projection on Peaches' part. He'd regularly scream at me and demean me in calls. He'd shame me based on age, thought processes, and sometimes things not even related to the topic. The only person who had personalized abuse thrown their way was me. You can even see that in the document where Peaches took a private fear, twisted it, and threw it out into the public. Even with all the stuff Peaches has done, I haven't done that to him. There are things he confided in me that I will take to my grave. In this one, Peaches claims I was being ableist to Rosa the day prior. We already touched on this, but here's the statement he was dead set on saying was ableist. When pressed on this, Peaches couldn't tell me how it was ableist. No one could. I got heated in the call because Peaches was regularly making claims about my behavior that he couldn't substantiate, instead choosing to berate and insult me even when I'm trying to help other people. Now we're getting to the one-on-one call we had the night after the Raven call, where Peaches is trying to highlight my tone as being awful and not what he thinks it should have been. Some context here. I had just woken up, and not in the morning for work. My wife woke me up to tell me Peaches was distressed, so I went to talk to him. I didn't immediately hammer on the ideation because Peaches has absolutely shut down on me or escalated before if I did so. I found it better in general to wait until he was comfortable taking it to me himself, but tone policing me is something Peaches would do regularly, stating intent due to tone without even clarifying it or accepting the answers given. This will be the last one I directly cover, but here Peaches is claiming his ideation for the past year was brought on by the Rosa call. This not only contradicts literally every time he's talked about it, but also the fact that he's previously blamed me for his ideation, or his life circumstances, or what happened to him in 2020. I really hate to say this, but this reads more like Peaches trying to gain pity to avoid accountability for the Rosa call. It's not really that hard, honestly. This isn't necessary. It's likely Peaches will try to come back. His live stream channel is privated, so he still has a platform if he wants to make an attempt. But should he? Not right now. Despite all that he's done to me, I know he's unwell. He needs genuine help. He needs a proper diagnosis and to get with a decent therapist instead of quitting the minute he runs into a bad one. He needs to stay offline and focus on his life and new job so he can get the independence he's always said he's wanted. But most importantly, he needs to find himself and realize that he has actual problems to fix instead of just taking out his problems on other people. I think he can come back after a few years, but only if he actually corrects his behavior. But while I ultimately forgive him for what he's done to me, I can't let him back in my life. He's done too much damage to others and myself. On top of what Peaches has done to me, I feel the need to highlight that Peaches' public values are not, in fact, his private ones. Here you'll see Peaches getting on to people for body-shaming Neora in his stream, but had no problem body-shaming people in private regularly. There's also the racism that Peaches would allow in his spaces, allowing Lumi to be racist about Mexicans in his personal server. Gee, I wonder why. Peaches has regularly complained about people being edgy, but has no issue naming parts of his personal server after a concentration camp, or finding it funny that Lumi scared Susie and I into thinking Peaches was dead. We should also note that Peaches wanted to get Lumi to gaslight me into believing his hallucinations were me, but the most pressing is the amount of slurs Peaches used regularly. While I've worked to remove them from my lexicon, Peaches demanded to still be able to use them, much to Heaton and I's chagrin. Here's some examples of that. There's a difference between reclamation and still using a slur as a slur. Peaches and Lumi did the latter, regularly. This is just a sample of the type of values Peaches would proclaim externally, but never hold internally. I could continue this video for probably another hour detailing the things Peaches has done, and maybe I'll talk about it more openly later on in life, but still have other things I need to cover in this video, so we're going to move on now. There are some people that think I should just address my wrongdoings and apologize and do only that, but that's not how this works. I'm not obligated to let dishonest, crazy people take shots as though they have a place to. The only reason any of them are trying this is due to the fact that I've exposed them for other things in the past, possibly because at this point they have a vendetta against me for that, and I'm going to line that out here. This isn't a defense of the Rosa stuff, so cool your jets. While information should be taken regardless of source if it's true, in cases like this, paying attention to the history and biases of said sources is also important. If it was someone who has known me for a few years and doesn't seem to have any biases against me other than genuinely telling me when they think I'm out of line, paying heed to them would make more sense. But the people I'm talking about here have a bias rooted in the fact that they've been called out for their actions by me in the past. This isn't about the truth. This is about trying to set better, dude. Leia Something is some weird commentary pick-me girl that's been obsessed with me ever since I put her friend Papa Rivet around Blast for doing the exact same thing they were mad at Slug for doing. She's in her mid-30s, and I think it's pretty obvious she wants the attention from people she never got from her dad. She can feign offense over what I said to Rosa, but what she allows her chat to say about Zach from homophobia to sexual harassment shows she doesn't actually care. I'm not really interested in speaking to her at the moment, but if she needs help finding her dad, I'm sure I can chip in.
would you be able to just call the mom again and tell her that, yeah, Rin is not doing good?
I could, but I'm not. Because I am tired of this person being able to hide. There's going to be no more of that. They want to keep putting on their pants and swinging like they're a big boy. They're going to get hit like one.
Understood.
Okay,
then hit me.
Since you insist, Rin. Rin is a commentary nobody previously known under the handles of Galvanum, FishLizard.zip, Mind Your Own Business, Werewolf, and a name that starts with J that he suddenly decided was dead naming, even though it's not a legal name and was a username he picked for himself. Something every other trans person I've spoken to says makes no sense, but I'll honor it despite feeling it's to hide from their past. A pattern for him. Akumu wanted to know where my claim that Toasty wasn't going to be held accountable came from. That would be from Rin, who runs the FCK Leaks account, where he stated just that. See, Rin here is pretty infamous in the FCC, mostly for being a deranged stalker, something he apparently thinks is funny now.
4 years ago, I was 19, terminally online. And also, yeah, it was also from after effects of really bad events in my life, but it's not an excuse, it's still really cringe. And you could call it all you want, I don't care. That's what a lot of people make fun of me for, and at this point, it's kind of funny. I find it funny.
So this is...
Yes, Rin, it's totally funny that you stalked and obsessed over someone for years because they put up a boundary you refuse to respect. It's totally hilarious that you wrote an 80-page doc about this person with the express intent of using it as blackmail, where you made it a point to also put their legal first name in it. This isn't the only stunt this maniac has pulled either. When Heaton was struggling with ideation, this genius's response was to tell her how if she did, she'd be forgotten. I know all of this, because in 2022, I was approached by Heaton and Rin's victim, June, to get Rin into a call to knock all of this off. A call I will be releasing. Don't you worry. Rin, of course, didn't stop and still decided to lie about Yoon and Heaton, attempting to undermine them by attacking their support networks and using FROM as a pawn to do so. It was at this point that they had enough. Rin said on the FCK Leaks account that I threatened to call his father, but instead called his mom. He walked it back after being approached by an FCK victim that I told I had the call. Convenient. So here's the reality of what happened. Rin didn't keep his word, so I called him. In that call, I had him pass the phone to his mom because he was panicking. The next day, I told Rin to take a year offline to work on their mental health. He said he would, but, of course, didn't, because his obsessive behavior, which he uses to excuse his actions, would always be something he happily gave into. Despite his regular hand-wringing about the FCC people coming after him, he sure liked following everything they were doing. So of course, when he had the opportunity to attack people he's been stalking for years via the FCK Leaks account, he took it. And here's where I may point out that I may cut Akumu some slack for how he handled all this, possibly due to inexperience. I will cut Rin none of that slack. Rin doesn't actually care about the victims of all of this. He only uses them when he wants to shield his actions. The easiest way to see this is to look at the account itself. It's supposed to be about the FCK. Most of the posts seem directed at me, and concerning me. Newsflash, I wasn't in the FCK. This is because Rin cares more about having a podium to spout their lunacy, especially now that he's getting actual attention over it. No thought to how victims of this may feel about an account allegedly dedicated to calling out FCK stuff focusing on me instead. This is a pattern for Ren. See, I was tasked by a couple of people to look into a situation I can't currently talk about publicly yet. Something that also involved Ren. I told Ren explicitly to sit on the doc they made about one of the actors until I got the confirmation to go ahead with a video about all of this. Of course, Ren can't do that. He has to be the center of things. He released the doc ahead of schedule and may have cost other victims a chance to speak out about this that they really needed. All because Ren can't follow simple instructions. He's also extremely inconsistent in his values. He's very scared that his friends in the LGBTQ will find out that his father is a donating, dyed-in-the-wool Republican, but will happily hitch his wagon to transphobes like Akumu and Kumo. And before he screeches guilt by association, and points to me to forgetting to unfollow Ms. Zizi, there's a difference between a Twitter follow, which plenty of people in our circles use to keep tabs of people of interest, not just as a means of showing support for mutuals or people we like, versus actively working with and colluding with people whose principles break your own sense of identity. Ren made some of the art Akumu is using, for example. This isn't guilt by association. This is Ren keeping company with people and not wanting to be held accountable for it. Furthermore, his upset about the FCK rings hollow to me. Why? Well, remember the call I published with Call Me Nil? Remember this part?
Okay, that's funny.
In the server, I used to have an actual docs section where pedophiles would be doxed. And Lio had to sit me down and tell me, hey, when you're doxing pedophiles in your server, it's probably not good to have anybody under 18 in there. Which, at the time, I did not understand, but after he spoke to me about it, I realized Yeah, that's probably
No.
a good idea.
No, I shouldn't have had to. Anybody with any modicum of common sense would know you do not put children in a room where child predators are being dealt with. Nil left predator hunting evidence and info accessible to kids that she let in the server, and got no pushback. Know who else was there and said absolutely nothing? Rin. Rin shouldn't bother with their billionth run and rename. He needs to actually get offline, stop the obsession with people who want nothing to do with him, stop consorting with people opposed to his alleged values, and getting involved in serious situations he has no business in. I'm sure Rin will have a meltdown over this, but at this point, I don't care. Rin made their bed. They can lie in it. Now we're going to talk briefly about the FCK and the actions of some of the people there. I've had plenty of comments in my Crystal video claiming I'm inconsistent in how I handled Peaches versus how I've handled other people. While there's no direct comparison people could give, I better understand what they meant now. It's more vibes based than anything else. I know I spent the majority of my time screaming at weirdos, but I try to alter how I approach things after the Rosa call. I'm genuinely trying to see more nuance and give people more slack when I can. It's why I didn't drag people like Nezzy, Ellie, Peaches, or other people that just didn't have a filter into a call. I've dealt with other servers with similar issues before and have been just as even-handed, like Nil's server. But I never made videos about it, so of course no one's gonna know that off the bat. That being said, there's people that do need to be held accountable. I know Thuman is working on a video about the whole situation, and I'm fighting the thoughts Peaches put in my head so I can trust her on this. So listen to her video. Listen to the victims. Akumu is expecting me to defend the actions of the people I know here, to mount a defense of them. I won't, because someone should have said something. However, not everyone has that knowledge initially. Heck, I do, and I still screw up sometimes. I'm hoping they just learn from it and grow. So long as they do that and don't repeat the behavior, that's all I can reasonably ask for. What's my takeaway from all of this, though? A good question, and one that I've been struggling with articulating the entire time this video has been in production. One thought is that I don't want to hear anyone who immediately took a side when this all began mention any other dramas where people were dogged on without their side being heard, especially with how knowingly dishonest the people I've mentioned have been. At the same time, I've spent no small amount of time reflecting. I've been involved with dealing with the worst of humanity for over 6 years now. 6 years without the support system that I needed. It's absolutely made me deteriorate mentally and physically. In looking for resources for this video, I had to listen to some older calls. After being in therapy for my anger issues and on medication alongside altering how I conduct myself in calls, I don't even recognize myself in these older calls. All that anger and sometimes over absolutely nothing. I treated some people that didn't deserve it horribly. I won't lie. I hate showing this much vulnerability. I never wanted to make the fact that I've been in therapy and on medication public. Since I'm being accused of not changing, I feel I don't really have a choice but to make that public. Most people figure out where they are based on other people. So while others may tell me that me having anger issues was obvious, it wasn't to me. I always saw others with anger issues as being physically violent or regularly unhinged. I tried to channel my anger into productive things. After all, who deserves that more than predators and the other morally repugnant individuals? I never saw how it spilled onto people like Jibs. All I wanted to do was help people, and I still do. But I can't be doing what I have been the past 6 years. I never made this public, but I stopped doing active predator hunting last year. I still have a few things to cover, but I don't think I can keep getting emotionally and mentally in that space. It does things to you. It's why officers that cover this only do so for so long and get a lot of mental help for it. It colors how you see things. I saw a freaking bumper sticker the other day that said "I heart grooming" and my heart jumped into my throat. It was in relation to pet grooming, but my brain is wired to see that word in only one way, and that's a smaller thing. I'm trying to be better. I really am. I just have a lot to process right now, and hopefully some bridges can be rebuilt. I still want to help people, and I still plan to, but I can't handle predation stuff anymore. Please don't bring that to me going forward. I'll do a video soon telling people how to properly handle that stuff, but that's all I can do now. I hopped into predator hunting because I wanted to be part of a solution instead of being a Monday night quarterback. Having dealt with something similar and no one helping me then, I wanted to be that for others. I wanted to be for others what I needed at the time, but I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't understand what it does to people psychologically. I didn't have the tools to do the job properly, and I left myself open to people who brought out the worst in me. For that, I am also sorry. I'll still help with other things when I can. I feel there are times I can take hits more than others. It's why I was so aggressive with Smash. It got him to focus on me. Same with some of the harassers of the other people I know. That I can handle. The day-to-day weirdos and degenerates. But what of Senate? I know a lot of people are concerned with plans for it. Well, the people currently in that server now know what's happened. I've archived it. Invites are dead as well. It will no longer be used. I tried to salvage that server's reputation over the past year, but it's too sullied by the bad behavior. Instead, I started a new server, a community server for the channel that will also function as a hub for content creation and conflict resolution. We're going into this with an open mind, and if you want to help and to build trust, I can certainly use it. I'm going to try to open up to more people. I'm not an islander myself, and I can't keep acting like I am. More importantly, I can't let toxic traits I've learned continue to harm people needlessly. I've regularly been accused of not taking criticism, which I disagree with, but I'll still make it an open space to criticize me when needed. I'm even more openly interacting with some of the people I was encouraged not to, who will happily call me out if I'm in the wrong, and have done so in the past, even in the process of making this video, because any criticism made in good faith can only benefit everyone. Speaking of which, an hour after this video is done premiering, I'll field questions for a couple of hours in the new server. Later, I'll start putting out calls that deal with some of the scumbags that have tried to capitalize on all of this. The artists will continue to eat well, but after that, I need some rest. Wanted to enjoy the weekend of our anniversary with my wife, but couldn't due to all of this. Also, during all of this, I lost my grandma. I haven't had time to mourn her. I now have to live in a world for the first time in over 90 years that doesn't have her. I'll hopefully rebuild the trust and faith people have put into me. I've had no shortage of people tell me that my content gives them strength after all the things they've gone through, knowing that evil people can be confronted, that it's not impossible. I want people to still see that. I need my spaces, both on my channel and my server, to be a place where hurt and struggling people are cared for. If I fail in that, then what's the point? I also want to talk more about the things I'm passionate about. There's also promises Peach has made to his audience concerning his Ko-Fi and GoFundMe goals that were never met. I'll try and do that for the people instead, so that's what I'll be doing as well. I'll always be held accountable. For everything. And I think those of you who are willing to wait and hear my side, for those of you who decided to cut me off without hearing me out, with the exception of one person, I'll have to think about it. I'd like to thank the people who helped me on this behind the scenes and the people who never lost hope in me, or just people willing to wait and hear my side. It means a lot. I need to get some rest now. I'll see you all in the new server. Take care.